Chapter 640. Hellion Vivian felt that His Highness was disrespecting her more and more. He was lecturing her in front of the palace maids and didn't give her any face at all. No, she had to resist today. What are you doing? Can you not interrupt me at such a crucial time? Hellion Vivian was complaining in her heart when Beligaju put the bun into her mouth. She originally wanted to refuse in an imposing manner, but the aroma of the noodles quickly rushed to her nose. Hellion Wei couldn't help but take a bite. The noodles were made with mushrooms and meat, and there were even shrimps inside. The noodles of the steamed bun were very authentic, and when it entered her mouth, it was very chewy. Hellion Wei's eyes couldn't help but light up, and immediately ate obediently. Forget it, sooner or later, he would like her to the point that he couldn't help himself. At that time, she would order him around. This meat bun was really good. Hellion Vivian accepted the man's feeding naturally and her eyes narrowed happily. As she ate, she imagined what His Highness would look like when His Highness didn't dare to resist no matter what she wanted him to do. Her heart was extremely happy and she couldn't help but clench her little fists. This was her life goal from now on. After Bailey Jiaoju saw her actions, his eyes flashed with a trace of a smile. His hand also followed and reached over, getting a little closer. The person in front of him ate like a well-behaved little fox. After retracting her claws, she was very obedient. That pair of eyes were sparkling. So much so that she did not even care that the meat bun was being held in his hand. This kind of posture was so intimate. When she opened her mouth to bite, the tip of her tongue brushed past the touch of his finger, which made a certain highness feel very satisfied. After breakfast, Hellion Wei was sleepy. While she was still in his arms, she sat on his lap and yawned. She did not look like a cat, she looked like a dog, or even a husky. Her fluffy ahoge stood up on the top of her head, which was very iconic. Beligaju looked at her appearance and the smile on his face became wider. He kissed the corner of his pet's mouth, then picked her up and put her on the bed. Hellion Vivian originally thought that he was going to work after putting her down. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, she was pulled into an embrace filled with a pleasant smell. The man patted her back with his fingers and rested his chin on her head, patting her every now and then. Hellion Vivian felt comfortable. She reached out and hugged the man's strong waist. She sniffed the unique sandalwood scent and turned her face. "Hurry up and sleep." Beligaju whispered orders into her ear. His voice was as elegant and cold as ever, but his actions were gentle. He gently planted a kiss on her forehead. Hellion Vivian's eyes were still closed. Every time she was in his arms again, the feeling was different. The strong and steady heartbeat beside her ear overlapped with hers, making Hellion Vivian feel a sense of peace that she had never felt before. While she was half asleep, Hellion Vivian heard someone reporting outside. "Your Highness, the Shenyuan Kingdom's envoy has entered the capital." Shadow was brave enough to say this. No one dared to disturb his master at this time. Eunuch Sun was not here, so this life-threatening task was transferred to him. Hellion Vivian asked sleepily, "Is something the matter?" Beligaju patted her back again and coaxed her like he was coaxing a child. "Nothing, sleep for a while more." Hellion Vivian raised the 2 strands of hair on her head. She did not understand and her eyes were very heavy. She turned her face to the side and planned to continue sleeping. Beligaju was not satisfied with her escaping from his arms and pulled her back. "Sleep here." Hellion Vivian also liked the two of them lying together. It was just that she subconsciously felt that he had something to do, so she turned her face to the side. Now that she was back in the warmest embrace, she closed her eyes and fell asleep. Her breathing was so soft that it was almost like she was blowing bubbles. Shadow could not hear the movements inside and did not dare to continue speaking. He lowered his head and waited outside the room. Bailey Jiaoju coaxed her to sleep again before he lifted the curtain embroidered with dragons and phoenixes soaring through the clouds. Draped in a pure black fur cloak, he strolled out and said, "We've entered the capital." Shadow lowered his head. The informants in the capital reported that this time, the Shenyuan Kingdom's crown prince is not the only one accompanying them. It seems like they are planning to do something. This highness understands. Beligaju's side profile looked indifferent and perfect, according to the customs of the past, Since the envoys have entered the capital, we will first collect the tribute and then discuss the matter. Shadow lowered his eyes and replied, yes. When the Shenyuan Kingdom's envoy heard the news from the palace, his face was polite, but he couldn't help but sneer in his heart. This third prince still thinks that the War Dragon Empire is the same as before, daring to mention the tribute. When Elder Shu Wu heard this, he stroked his beard. It seems that we have taken Beligaju, who possesses the world's #1 martial chi, too seriously. He can fight wars, but he doesn't understand the friendly relations between nations at all. When he enters the palace tonight, he will know how foolish he is to mention the tribute. If Little Seven had heard this, she would definitely roll her eyes at Elder Shu Wu. Why would Master need to be friendly? There was no such thing as neighboring countries or not, only subordinate countries. If they were disobedient, he would beat them to death. This was the way his third brother had taught him since he was young. That night, it was snowing heavily in the capital. The branches were covered with beautiful white flowers, and the sky was a vast expanse of white. When some of the more conservative ministers heard that the royal family had mentioned the tribute, they were very nervous, but they didn't dare to ask directly. Not only were they anxious, but when they saw the Shenyuan Kingdom's envoy, they were even more polite. Xiong Jing watched from the side and snorted heavily. If he had to say, His Highness had done this very well. Regardless of the current state of the imperial court, they couldn't allow others to bully them. In the sleeping quarters, the palace servants carried things and walked back and forth in an orderly manner. Although they were busy, there wasn't the slightest bit of chaos. They were all dressed up for Hellion Vivian. The princess consort is so beautiful. When the little palace maid said this, she was sincere. Looking at the person in the mirror who could take away one's soul with just a smile, she couldn't help but sigh. Her skin was white and delicate, and even carried a fragrance. Other than her looks, she had a languid temperament that no one could learn. When the princess consort looked at them again, she would always have a mischievous smile on her face. Her beautiful phoenix eyes were raised, making people's hearts beat faster. The little palace maid didn't know that in the past, Hellion Vivian had worn men's clothing in the modern world. She was a living example of a military tycoon, proficient in all the 18 tricks to pick up girls. Otherwise. Chapter 641. She would not be able to take down His Highness so quickly. This was all because she had studied countless secrets of chasing after a wife. I am hungry. Hellion Vivian flirted with the palace maids for a while before she started to act shamelessly again. She put her chin on the dressing table and covered her stomach with one hand. She looked pitiful yet handsome. I want to eat pork trotters, the stewed kind. The palace maid was only one eyebrow away from drawing Hellion Vivian's eyebrows. She looked at her princess consort and felt like she was looking at her sister acting coquettishly. She pursed her lips and smiled at Qing Zhon, who was standing beside her. Sister Qing Zhon, look at the princess consort. As soon as she finished her sentence, she felt a cold breeze beside her ear. It was the master. Your Highness. The palace maids knelt in a row in panic. Beligaju did not look at them. Instead, he pinched Hellion Vivian's chin as if there was no one around. Are your claws restless again? No. Hellion Vivian pushed him away and yawned. She wanted to waste more time. I am hungry. Bailey Jiaju laughed. He took the fur cloak prepared by the palace maids and wrapped it around her body. Then, he carried her in his arms and said, half an hour ago, you ate a pot of boiled fish by yourself. That was enough food for 3 people. But I am hungry again now, Hellion Vivian said seriously. She tried to poke her face out of the fur cloak. Beligaju reached out and pressed her back. Hellion Vivian was annoyed. What are you doing? Your face is too ugly. You need to do some work. Beligaju said calmly. He took some black pearls from somewhere and put some powder on her face. Only then did he put her down satisfactorily. Hellion Vivian looked at herself in the bronze mirror. Her face was dark. Are you sure there is nothing wrong with your aesthetic standards? The palace maid's efforts of 2 hours were ruined by His Highness. Come here. Beligaju stood behind her and twirled the black jade ring on his finger with a faint smile. Hellion Vivian walked over and raised her eyebrows slightly. She seemed to be asking, what else does he want to do? What she didn't expect was that the man actually smiled faintly and lowered his head. His slender fingers helped her roll up her drooping sleeves, revealing a circle of fox fur that was exquisitely made, which made her skin even fairer. The moment Belagaju bent down, the others held their breaths. They had also served many people, including the glamorous concubines and Empress Murong, who held the most power in the harem. However, none of them would be so cherished by their superiors. The third prince had been different from the other princes since he was young. Even if it was the emperor's order, he would make a decision based on his mood. Even the most honorable man in the world was nothing more than this. He was like a cloud in the sky, exuding a noble aura. Even the most beautiful woman would involuntarily submit in front of him. They originally thought that such a person would never know how to lower his head. But now, the palace servants' gazes fell on Belagaju, and there wasn't a single one that wasn't shocked. That kind of highness was too gentle, so gentle that it was almost breathtaking. Hellion Vivian was also stunned. She just watched him roll up one sleeve for her, then the second one. From her angle, the curve of the man's mouth was indescribably gentle. His lips were very light, and the sunlight shone in. He was so handsome that it made her heart itch. Hellion Vivian didn't even think. She leaned over to steal a kiss, then quickly stood still, as if nothing had happened. She was as shrewd as a little fox. Belagaju raised his head and saw her like this. He bent his slender fingers and tapped her forehead. Then, while he was tying the chain around her waist, he leaned over to her ear and asked with a wicked smile, "You want it? Hellion Vivian. When dinner is over, I will satisfy you." As soon as Bailey Jiaoju finished speaking, he straightened his body and led the people outside the room out. His tall and slender back gave off a strong aura of an emperor. Hellion Vivian didn't even have a chance to explain. What did he mean by she wanted it? She just kissed him. Just a kiss and he thought so much. Beast. But, to be able to sleep with such a handsome man, it was considered a gain. Hellion Vivian thought about it and her mood improved again. Her stomach was still hungry, so she reached out and touched it. She walked to the wooden window and put her finger on her lips. With a handsome whistle, the shadowy mercenary kneeled on the ground. "Eldest miss. How's the investigation?" Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips. At this moment, she looked much more dangerous than when she was in front of Belagaju. The mercenary lowered his head and thought that their eldest miss had probably given all her good intentions to the royal family and put all her bad intentions on others. Other than the people from the Shenyuan kingdom, the people from the Huangzi kingdom and Yuanzhong kingdom are also on their way. What are they planning to do? Unite the three kingdoms? Hellion Vivian smiled. The mercenary knew that his eldest miss had always been smart. He nodded and said, "The Huangzi kingdom and Yuanzhong kingdom aren't very strong. This time, they are openly provoking us. It's puzzling. What's there to be puzzled about? It's obvious that the Shenyuan kingdom gave them benefits." Hellion Vivian yawned and the smile on her face turned cold. They won't wake up early if there's no benefit. They thought that the War Dragon Empire would be in a panic after the emperor died. They want to take advantage of this situation to get a share of the soup. That's why they are coming to the capital together. After hearing this, the mercenary's heart sank. That's bad. This time, they are using the divine exorcism seal in the capital as an excuse. They are saying that there's a loophole in the seal here and that they need to send people to guard the city. They're dreaming. Hellion Vivian laughed coldly. The royal family won't agree. The mercenary grunted in agreement. It's because the royal family won't agree that the people from the Shenyuan kingdom called the people from the other two kingdoms over. I don't know what they want to do. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. Why should we care about them? Hellion Vivian pressed her left hand on her neck and moved it back and forth. There was an indescribable evil in her voice. Since they came to my War Dragon Empire, we have to make them leave something behind before letting them go. Otherwise, I'll lose face as a military tycoon. Mercenary, you can just say that you want to steal money, that's enough. Miss, we really don't lack money. Can you not do this? Oh, right. Cancel that thing I asked you to do last time. Hellion Vivian seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly turned her head and instructed the mercenary. The royal family doesn't like to accompany people. They won't do it no matter how much money they have. Sigh, I can't force them. Mercenary, he didn't have the guts to take it to heart. Making the royal family accompany people, this is a method that only Miss can think of. Chapter 642. Since we can't make a deal, let's make that Princess Shenyuan give up. Hellion Vivian looked at her wrist slowly, and a bloodthirsty smile appeared on her thin lips. Tell her who Beligaju belongs to. Yes. The mercenary said faintly, and looked up at the sky. You've been planning to do this from the start. The appearance fee is all a lie. You just don't allow anyone to peek at the royal family. Hellion Vivian admitted this point. She thought about it carefully. The sole fragment that she risked her life to get back through time and space was hers alone. It was fine for others to admire it or like it, but such an obvious provocation, did they really think that she was easy to bully? The mercenary didn't leave. Seeing the coldness in his miss's eyes, he didn't know what would happen at the palace banquet tonight. He asked, do we need to call the general and the others over? No, it's called a one-hit kill. A group of people won't be able to show my imposing manner. Hellion Vivian waved her hand. The mercenary's mouth twitched. Who was the one who said that they liked it when the other party had fewer people and they had more people on their side? That way, it would be easier to bully them. Now, they were showing off their heroism. Little Black, don't say that your boss didn't teach you. Hellion Wei smiled at him. When you're chasing someone, nothing else is important, but you have to know how to act cool. You guys are standing there and stealing my limelight. Bailey Jiaoju won't know how handsome I am. The mercenary was speechless. Do you think the royal family is blind? Also, he's not called Little Black. Don't give him random nicknames. If you have the time to teach your subordinates those unreliable methods, why don't you be more obedient at night? The person who was being talked about just walked in from outside. He grabbed Hellion Vivian's collar and pulled her far away from the window. His magnetic voice was filled with displeasure. It's snowing outside. Don't you know that it's cold? Hellion Vivian touched her face. It's okay, it's not that cold. However, she said, how can you look down on my methods of chasing people? I'm at the level of a god. Do you understand? The man was obviously dismissive of her words. He held her hand and drilled into his inner shirt. Hellion Vivian shouted, you're acting like a hooligan in broad daylight. If you keep yelling like a ghost, I'll throw you out. Beligaju's voice was very calm. It was obvious that he wasn't lying. Hellion Vivian calmed down under his cold gaze. She did not move and allowed Beligaju to put her hand on his chest. It was so warm. The skin on her palm was very hot. Not only her hand, but even her heart seemed to be warm. The palace servants were still waiting at the side. When they saw this scene, they all lowered their heads. Everyone was moved and envious. Wang Fei was the only one in the world who could make His Highness do this. However, His Highness raised Wang Fei as if she was a child. He was very controlling. No one knew if this was a good thing or a bad thing. At this moment, Beligaju was looking at Hellion Vivian lazily. His long eyes were full of warning. If I see you standing at the window without an outer shirt next time, I'll break your pair of claws. I know. I'm just going to discuss something with Xiao Hei. Hellion Vivian defended herself. She was about to retract her hand. Don't let it get cold. Don't you have a hand warmer? Hearing this, Qing Zhon immediately placed the heater beside the two of them. Beligaju did not take it. Instead, he held Hellion Vivian's wrist as usual. When her pair of claws were not cold, he took it over and ordered the people waiting outside, go and prepare the banquet. Yes. They replied in unison, and there was an echo in their voices. Pa, the snow on the trees fell and hit the golden roof. The exquisite and expensive decorations in the palace reflected the glossy marble. It gave off a mysterious and solemn feeling. All of this was because of Beligaju, who was sitting on the dragon throne. Unlike the previous emperor who took pills for many years, he exuded the aura of a king from head to toe. He was elegant, cruel, indifferent, and evil. Even if he was wearing a long fur coat, one could still feel his tall and straight back. His muscles were clear and strong. The pure and resolute aura of an ancient aristocrat was expressed on his body. It was the elegance that was accumulated over time. Beligaju looked a little indifferent. However, when the corner of his mouth twitched, the aura that could not be ignored quickly infected his handsome face. It was as if he was born to rule the darkness. He reclined on the dragon throne and swirled the glass in his hand. Under the candlelight, the liquid looked particularly alluring. When he heard the envoys from Huangzi country and Yuanzhong country enter, Beligaju narrowed his eyes. He did not look away from the glass. Instead, he elegantly raised it to his nose and sniffed. The two envoys were followed by their own exorcists. When they saw Beligaju acting like this, they sneered in their hearts. This third prince probably did not know anything. That was why he was so indifferent. In their opinion, the War Dragon Empire could only go down the path of political marriage. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the empire was, if they did not handle this matter well, everything would be in vain. This one represents Huangzi country. This one represents Yuanzhong country. Greetings to the royal. The envoys placed their left hand on their right shoulder. They looked very well behaved, but there was an ambiguous meaning behind those rules. In their impression, the War Dragon Empire's fifth prince was the one who truly understood the political situation. If the War Dragon Empire's emperor had not suddenly passed away, the third prince would not have been the one to take charge of this matter. Originally, they were wary of this person's title of number one in the world. Now, it seemed that there was no need to worry at all. Martial qi and exorcism were two different things. It had nothing to do with politics. If the fifth prince was in charge, he would definitely not act like this. He would be courteous and treat them as distinguished guests. The emperor had passed away early, and the evidence in the court was not stable. The biggest taboo was to anger the surrounding countries. Although the current War Dragon Empire looked the same as before on the surface. However, no one would believe that there was not a little bit of trouble in this matter. The thoughts of the officials were a hurdle. The generals who held military power were another hurdle. The third prince probably did not realize it yet. That was why he was showing off like this. When the Shenyuan country's people arrived, the third prince would know that this visit would not be as simple as before. The envoys were led to their seats by the palace servants. The two of them looked at each other and more or less revealed a smile and contempt that only the other could understand. Hellion Vivian, who was sitting in the back seat, saw this scene and slightly raised her eyebrows. Her fingers tapped on the armrest of the chair, and there was a thick playfulness in her lazy appearance. Chapter 643. When the old officials of the conservative faction saw His Highness like this, they were anxious. They wanted to talk to the two emissaries so that they wouldn't be dissatisfied. They raised their cups and said, "Sirs, you must be tired from the long journey. You must be tired, right? Are you tired or not? It's just that the capital city is not as lively as the rumors say. When we entered the city, there weren't many hawkers." The envoy said with a smile. He was implying that the War Dragon Empire's national power was not as strong as the rumors said. How could the old ministers not understand the underlying meaning? They were afraid that they would hurt the harmony if they rebutted him, so they pretended not to understand and smiled. Beligaju did not have any expression on his face. He only smiled and drank a mouthful of wine in his cup, then glanced in the direction of the minister. For some reason, the minister shuddered. Since Lord Ji can't answer the question. Beligaju played with the white jade porcelain cup in his hand and said faintly, "Then there's no need to attend the banquet. Take him away." The last three words made the atmosphere in the hall extremely cold. The two envoys were stunned as well. For a moment, they forgot what they were supposed to say. The minister with the surname Ge did not know what he did wrong. The shadow guards rushed up and took off the plume on his head. "Your Highness, Your Highness." Listening to the noise beside her ear, Wei Wei wasn't the least bit surprised that this would be the result. The emissary didn't come with good intentions, yet this one surnamed Ge still rushed up to curry favor. This was simply losing face for the War Dragon Empire. A certain highness would definitely want this person's life, without a doubt. Beligaju did not have any expression. He still had a faint smile on his face, as if he was not the one who wanted to kill someone. The two envoys felt their scalps stiffen. Why was the third prince so strange? The exorcists sitting beside them did not see the undercurrent and continued to smile. Could it be that the capital city is so bleak because of the seal? Plus, there is no way to solve it. Liu Yu felt that the direction of the conversation was getting more and more out of hand. He was so angry that his face turned green. It was all that GE guy's fault. He made them lose the initiative and forced the other party to such an extent. The two emissaries also laughed and were about to speak. Little Seven, tell them why there are so few people on the streets of the capital. The ministers heard the noise and looked up. They saw Hellion Vivian supporting her face with one hand and smiling lazily. Her eyes were deep. The little one held a meat bun in his hand as if he did not care about this question at all. It's getting cold. Who would still be wandering outside? Everyone is doing business in the tea house. Why can't these people understand such a simple principle? What a waste of time. Hearing this, Hellion Wei immediately assumed the posture of a judge. Little Seven, how many times have I taught you? Don't look down on others just because their country is small and they don't know much. We need to be broad-minded. I'm very handsome and very broad. Little Seven nodded obediently. I don't laugh at them. The two emissaries, saying that their country was small and inexperienced, was considered broad-minded. Wasn't this scolding them in a roundabout way? And he said that he was not laughing at them. The exorcists were so angry that they were about to stand up. The two emissaries stopped them and said in a deep voice, "Don't be rash. Are we just going to let them say whatever they want?" The exorcists had never been treated like this before. Their faces were full of anger. Hellion Vivian looked at them from above and smiled gently. What's wrong with the two emissaries? Why are you standing up? The emissaries gritted their teeth. They thought to themselves, what's wrong with us? Don't you know? Where did this woman come from? Why is she so infuriating? Is there something wrong with what Little Seven said just now? Hellion Wei picked up the teacup in her hand, her voice somewhat absent-minded. He's still young, innocent, and childish. With the tolerance of the two countries, he shouldn't bicker with a child, right? No, they would. The Huangzi nation's emissary gritted his teeth as he uttered those words. The exorcists were still unwilling to give up. The emissary whispered in their ears, "Are you really going to argue with a child? Didn't you hear the word tolerance? If this continues, we'll be the ones losing face." The exorcists clenched their fists and could only sit down with sullen expressions. The two emissaries were also a little upset. They had wanted to use this opportunity to provoke the other party, but they did not expect that they would be the ones to be humiliated in the end. However, what they did not expect was that this was not the end of it. Hellion Vivian looked at one of the exorcists. "Didn't you glare at our Little Seven just now?" The exorcists ignored her and snorted coldly. Hellion Vivian smiled slowly and said coldly, "Apologize." "What did you say?" Before the exorcists could say anything, Hellion Vivian interrupted him. "Lord Wang, this exorcist is a citizen of Huangzi country. Did your country not teach him how to behave in front of people? Little Seven is the seventh prince of the War Dragon dynasty. His status is far above his, yet he is so arrogant. Such an unruly person will only end up in the War Dragon dynasty, and that is, death." Hellion Wei said the last word with a smile on her face. The Huangzi country emissary froze. The exorcists were so angry that their eyes were about to spit fire. Hellion Vivian continued in an indifferent tone, "Of course, different countries have different rules. Visitors are guests. I don't know how your country teaches people, but at the very least, our War Dragon dynasty will not bully children." The emissary opened his mouth. "Huangzi country will not. Our Little Seven has always been timid. He can't stand being scared." Hellion Vivian did not listen to what he had to say. She glanced at the little one after she finished speaking. The little one immediately lowered his head and rubbed his tiger eyes with his small hands. His shoulders began to tremble slightly, and he looked pitiful, as if saying, "The whole world has hurt me." The exorcists widened their eyes. Just now, this child did not look scared at all. Why did he change his expression so quickly? Sigh, look at how scared the child is. Hellion Vivian sighed deeply and hugged the little one. Little Seven, don't cry. Lord Wang knows what to do. The emissary's expression could no longer be described with words. The muscles on his jaw twitched violently. He clenched his fists and growled, Yuelu. Apologize to the seventh prince. Chapter 644. What? The exorcist named Yu Lu turned around abruptly to look at the messenger who brought them here. The messenger lowered his voice and said, the citizens of the four kingdoms have witnessed the pilgrimage. If you don't apologize, what do you think the Huangzi kingdom's reputation will be? Everyone will say that we bullied their child. Compared to an apology, which one do you think will have a greater impact on our kingdom? But he clearly. Yu Lu looked at Messenger Wang's expression. No matter how angry he was, he could only hold it in. His face turned red as he said to the little one, I'm sorry. The 3 words were so cold that they seemed to have been ground out. It was enough to show his unwillingness. But so what if he was unwilling? He was still humiliated in front of everyone. The expressions of the messengers were no longer as relaxed as when they first arrived. Even the smiles on their faces were a little stiff. Liu Yu glanced at the seat of honor. Her eyes were shining. The third princess consort's trick was brilliant. Beligaju was also looking at Hellion Vivian. However, there was a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth, as if he was saying, aren't you shameless? Hellion Vivian understood and replied softly, I learned this from you. Besides, they were the ones who were shameless and bullied our little seventh prince first. Yes, they bullied me. The little one nodded happily. Shadow was very conflicted as he watched from the side. He had been in the palace for so many years, but he had never seen anyone really bully the seventh prince. It was already good enough that he didn't go and beat up others. Also, what cowardice. Was that really the seventh prince who would cause trouble wherever he went? He needed to digest the news that he had just heard. Of course, the messengers would not give up just like that. Since they had suffered a verbal setback, they would definitely seek revenge elsewhere. Let them be smug for a while. Once the people from the Shenyuan kingdom arrive, they will not be able to laugh anymore. By then, we will have the final say. While holding a cup, Lord Wang whispered into the angry Yu Lu's ear, there are not many people in the War Dragon Empire who know the art of yin and yang. Teaching them a lesson is like playing a game. Yu Lu gulped down a mouthful of wine and put down the cup. A sinister look flashed across his eyes. After persuading him, the emissary stood up and said politely, Royal family, Huangzi country has always stood aloof from worldly affairs and has always served the people wholeheartedly. Now that we have heard that the seal in the capital is in danger, we have rushed here overnight, hoping to save the people from this calamity. I wonder if the royal family will give us this opportunity. Hearing this, Beligaju's ink-black eyes flashed with a strange vastness, as if he was pondering. Then, he crossed his arms and supported his chin. The corners of his mouth slowly curled into an ice-cold smile. Lord Wang, how do you want me to give you this opportunity? Of course, our country will contribute. We will send the most elite exorcists and escort cavalry to be stationed near the capital. Seeing that he had taken the bait, the emissary said passionately, Royal family, there is no need to be so courteous. This is a special situation, and the 4 countries should join forces to deal with it. Beligaju listened to the emissary's words and twirled the ring on his finger. He smiled evilly. Lord Wang, if something happens to Huangzi country, I can lead the troops directly to attack. After all, it is just to help. I heard that the 4th prince of Huangzi country has recently taken a liking to kidnapping women. And Ying, go to the military field and gather the troops. We will set off tomorrow to help the emperor discipline his son. What do you think of this idea? The emissary's face changed color back and forth. His fingers trembled, but he couldn't refute a single word. Other than the other party's eloquence, the other party's eyes were too cold. Looking at the man like that, the emissary felt as if he had fallen into hell. Everywhere was cold. At this moment, a clear and magnetic voice suddenly came from outside the hall. This idea is indeed inappropriate. Hearing this, everyone turned to look in the direction of the voice. A man in a green shirt and a white robe walked into the hall. Behind him was a row of people. Other than the emissary, there was also a man dressed like an elder. The man had a sharp face. His long black hair was draped over his fur coat, and he wore a white jade earring in his ear. He had a tall nose bridge and thin lips. His aura was luxurious. Especially his eyes, which were as dark as the deep sea and carried a strong sense of bewitchment. He walked to the center of the hall with a smile that was neither light nor heavy on his face. However, compared to personal gain, saving the people from water and fire is the attitude that a leader should have. We can think of other ways, but the most important thing is how to solve the current problem in the capital. It's the Crown Prince of Shenyuan Kingdom, Zhongjing Wenren. Someone couldn't help but exclaim after seeing the man. It was obvious that everyone gasped when they heard the name Zhongjing Wenren. Even Helian Vivian didn't raise her head to look at the man standing in the center. Zhongjing Wenren, a famous handsome man, was the designated successor of the Shenyuan Kingdom. He had attained the gold-level martial qi long ago. It was said that he was as strong as Beligaju. Compared to Beligaju's indifferent and low-key personality, Zhongjing Wenren had always been in charge of his own country. He had been the crown prince for a long time. Not only was he skilled in martial qi, but he was also the best at governing a country. Most importantly, he was also an exorcist. Zhongjing Wenren smiled gently and turned his head. He continued, "Elder, tell me about your thoughts on our journey to the War Dragon dynasty. Resentful spirits are haunting the road, and the livestock are restless." Elder Shu Wu stroked his beard. The qi in the capital city has reached its limit. If there are no exorcists to help, the seal will be completely destroyed in less than a month. When that time comes, demons will run amok, and the human world will cease to exist. Royal, for the sake of the world, the Shenyuan Kingdom will not back down. I'm sure the other two neighboring countries will do the same. Ambassador Wang immediately agreed, "That's right. The matter of the seal is imminent. We must act immediately." Elder Shu Wu smiled and said, "If the royal is worried about a rebellion, there is a solution. As long as the two families become in-laws, everything will be solved." Beligaju didn't say anything. He just turned his head and rested his chin on his hand. He looked at Helian Vivian and smiled. Her beautiful face was a little seductive. He mainly wanted to see the expression on his pet's face. To his disappointment, the little fox was very calm. Helian Vivian's face was expressionless, but her eyes were cold. The little seventh prince sensed the atmosphere around him. He took a valiant step forward and began to rub his fists. He thought to himself, if third sister-in-law can't hold it in and beats him up, he would rush over and secretly give him a kick. Chapter 645. However, the ministers did not share the same thoughts. They initially thought that there was no other way. Once the three nations arrived, they would definitely be besieged. They did not expect the other party to propose a marriage alliance. Their eyes lit up as if they had seen hope. Someone stepped forward and said to Elder Shu Wu with a smile, "The War Dragon Empire and the Shenyuan Kingdom have always had a close relationship. It would be great if we could strengthen our ties through marriage." Elder Shu Wu smiled when he heard this. Lord Chen is right. The two of them chatted back and forth, and it was quite a warm atmosphere. Zhongjing Wenren did not listen to what the people below were saying. He stood tall and straight and looked at Bailey Jiaoju, who was sitting in the seat of honor. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "Brother Bailey, Wenren has arrived on time for the 3-year promise." Zhongjing Wenren smiled elegantly, but if one listened carefully, one would realize that there was a hint of provocation in his tone. Helian Wei listened from the side and heaved a long sigh. "Youngster, you can't be like this. Not only is His Highness a clean freak, he also has mild face blindness. He simply won't remember any 3 years promise." Sure enough, within Bailey Jiaoju's pair of beautiful eyes, there wasn't the slightest ripple. He only raised the corner of his eyes, his left hand supporting the armrest of the chair, unhurriedly opened his mouth. Within the clear coldness, there was a unique grace. "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" Even Zhongjing Wenren could not help but clench his fists when faced with this question. The anger in his eyes deepened. Is this man trying to intimidate me? Even if he has forgotten about me, someone has just mentioned my name. How dare he ask me who I am? Hellion Vivian held back her laughter and reminded him, he is the crown prince of the Shenyuan kingdom. Oh! Beligaju supported his face with one hand and furrowed his brows. It was as if he was trying to recall who the crown prince of the Shenyuan kingdom was. Zhongzheng Wenren's eyes turned cold. He maintained his smile and said, "It seems that Brother Bailey has finally remembered. I was still looking forward to having a match with you so that we can determine who is better." Beligaju held his chin and curved his thin lips. "As you wish." Hellion Vivian watched as Zhongzheng Wenren slowly sat down. She turned to look at Beligaju and asked, "Do you really remember who he is?" "No." Beligaju absent-mindedly turned the black jade thumb ring on his finger, and the smile at the corner of his mouth had a hint of black-bellied flavor. But, from what he said, he should be a defeated opponent. Upon hearing this, Zhongzheng Wenren, who was seated below, tightened his grip on the porcelain cup in his hand and turned to look at Elder Shu Wu. Elder Shu Wu narrowed his eyes and was about to speak. He heard Hellion Vivian say, "Oh, then don't worry about it." Elder Shu Wu could barely maintain the gentleness on his face. What did he mean by "don't worry about it"? Was this woman looking down on the crown prince, or was she looking down on the Shenyuan kingdom? Lord Chen was afraid that the two sides would quarrel again like they had with the Huangzi kingdom. After all, the Shenyuan kingdom was different from the other two neighboring countries. Their yin-yang exorcism technique was renowned throughout the world, and they could not be easily offended. Hence, he hurriedly said, "Elder Shu Wu, I heard that on the day the princess was born, the light of Buddha descended from the heavens, and thousands of beasts roared in unison. Even the drought-stricken lands were nourished by holy water from the heavens. The princess herself is as beautiful as a fairy and is fated with Buddha. On the day the Shenyuan kingdom entered the capital, the informants in the capital had spotted a young girl in the midst of the entourage. Furthermore, the Shenyuan kingdom's princess had a crush on Beligaju, and all the officials had heard of it. With a little deduction, they knew that the Shenyuan princess had followed them here. Lord Chen's question was also intended to give the Shenyuan kingdom a way out so that they could invite the princess to meet them. Elder Shu Wu naturally accepted this and laughed heartily. "I didn't expect the princess's name to have spread to the War Dragon dynasty. Konju, go and invite the princess over." Yes. If one did not look closely, the girl named Konju would have thought that she was a teenager because she was also wearing an exorcist white robe. Before she left, she glanced in the direction of Hellion Vivian, and her eyes were full of meaning. The little one understood the meaning behind her gaze and leaned over to Hellion Vivian and whispered into her ear, "Third sister-in-law, I'm really not the one to cause trouble. That woman just now was looking down on you on behalf of her princess." Hellion Vivian lowered her head and smiled. She tapped the little one with her finger and fed him a piece of date cake. She asked, "Who's more handsome, you or that crown prince?" "Of course third sister-in-law is more handsome." The little one held the date cake in his mouth and said firmly, "No one dares to court death in front of third brother. Third sister-in-law, you're the first." The corners of Hellion Vivian's mouth twitched. Was this still considered a compliment? The little one stopped talking when he saw the jujube cake. He squatted beside Hellion Wei's feet obediently with a pair of tiger-like eyes. He looked down and took a bite of the jujube cake. He was so adorable. Hellion Vivian hugged him, but he did not get up. She said that squatting like this was domineering. As an ancient divine beast, he had to squat like this. Elder Shu Wu watched this scene and laughed coldly in his heart. He wondered how such a stupid third princess consort had managed to marry Beligaju. He said to Lord Chen, who was in the same camp as them, "The third princess consort is really naive." Lord Chen did not respond. He knew what Elder Shu Wu was talking about. The third princess consort was obviously rude to a foreign envoy. If it had been in the past, he would have agreed with Elder Shu Wu. But now, after witnessing how terrifying that woman's combat skills were, he did not dare to say anything. However, this time, he could start from another angle. He had received benefits from the Shenyuan kingdom and had said what he should say. He had kept the things that he should not say to himself. He would not meddle in the rest and would only help from the sidelines. It should not be too obvious. Lord Chen was deep in thought when he looked up and was met with a pair of eyes that made his scalp tingle. He did not know if it was an illusion, but when he met the gaze of the royal family, he felt that there was a cold red light in that pair of long, narrow eyes. Lord Chen shuddered in fear and took a step back. Elder Shu Wu helped him up and asked in confusion, "Lord Chen?" Lord Chen finally regained his senses and exclaimed in surprise. He looked up at the seat of honor. The man's smile was languid and elegant, as if everything that had happened was just an illusion. Lord Chen heaved a sigh of relief. He had really scared himself. He had been in contact with the Shenyuan kingdom since the late emperor had just ascended the throne. Even the emperor had not noticed anything, so it was even more impossible for the third prince to notice anything strange. Moreover, the suggestion he was making now was all for the sake of the War Dragon dynasty. It was normal for the royal family to have political marriages. Lord Chen was deep in thought when he heard a loud announcement from outside the hall. The Shenyuan princess has arrived. Chapter 646. In an instant, all the officials turned to look at the door and saw a slender lady slowly walking in. She was dressed in a white fox fur coat with flower-like sleeves. Her petite and perfect face was only the size of a palm. She looked like a budding magnolia flower. She was untainted from head to toe and exuded a kind of pure and graceful beauty. She was the kind of lady that all men would like. Perhaps it was the nature of men that made them like this kind of delicate and soft lady the most. Yue greets the third prince. The lady's manner carried a Jiangnan vibe. Her gentleness did not lose its elegance. Many people were dumbfounded. When they heard the lady's voice, they gasped in amazement. Her voice was like a light drizzle that fell into their ears. The officials started to talk among themselves. Even the exorcists from the other two countries had their eyes fixed on Zongjing Yue. It was as if they were mesmerized by her beauty. Zongjing Yue smiled and lowered her head shyly. Her eyes never left the tall and outstanding figure sitting in the seat of honor. Lord Chen shook his head in amazement. Truly, seeing is believing. Princess Yue's celestial beauty is rare in the world. You flatter me. Elder Shu Wu stood in front of Zongjing Yue and stroked his beard. The old-fashioned officials finally came to their senses. Seeing that the atmosphere was good, they could not help but try to guess the royal's thoughts from the perspective of a man. It had been some time since the royal family married a wife. Although the third princess consort was not bad, she looked a little too competitive. After seeing too many of such women, one would definitely need an understanding flower to ease one's mind. Princess Shenyuan was beautiful and had a good figure. Coupled with her girlish shyness, who would not be moved by her beauty? Some of the officials turned their eyes and came to life. They sighed and said, "His Highness has always served the country and the people. The princess looks gentle and attentive. They are a perfect match." Zongjing Yue listened from the side. Her face was full of shyness. She looked very pretty when she was quiet. Little Seven held the pastry in his mouth and looked around. To his surprise, Third Aunt did not react at all. Instead, she smiled lazily. There was an indescribable evil in her expression. The little one felt that it was time for him to say something. If he did not, those old men would really push that woman over. Third sister-in-law. The little one tugged at Hellion Vivian's sleeve and said with a fierce expression, "Shouldn't we start now?" Hellion Vivian rested her chin on her other hand and said with a smile, "Don't touch me. I'm a civilized person." Lord Chen couldn't hear the conversation between the elder and the child. Seeing that there wasn't much movement, he smiled and continued to follow the words of his colleague. Indeed, they are a perfect match. If this matter can be settled, that would be great. Elder Shu Wu smiled politely. At this moment, Zongjing Yue tugged at his sleeve and looked at him. Elder Shu Wu understood what she meant and turned to look at Hellion Vivian. Whether or not this matter will succeed will depend on whether the third princess consort understands the bigger picture. Oh! Hellion Vivian was joking with the little one. When she heard someone mention her name, she raised her eyebrows lazily. Zongjing Yue did not want to make things too awkward. She knew that Hellion Vivian had a special feeling for that person, so she tugged at Elder Shu Wu's sleeve and said, "Elder sister, I haven't seen you for 5 years. I thought that you would marry into the Murong family. I didn't expect you to be in the palace." Hellion Vivian frowned when she heard this. Judging from the Shenyuan princess's words, it seemed that they knew each other. However, she did not have any memory of Shenyuan princess. Could it be that Zongjing Yu had met the original Hellion Vivian when she was searching for the soul fragment? "Elder sister, you should know that I've admired His Highness since I was a child. After so many years, I have never changed." When Zongjing Yu said this, her cheeks were pink and she looked very shy. When the exorcists heard this, they could not help but feel envious. They did not expect that there would be a woman who could publicly express her love for the third prince. How many lifetimes must it have taken for the third prince to have such good fortune? "I hope that elder sister will grant my wish." Zongjing Yu bit her thin lips and looked very pitiful. When the bystanders saw this, they could not help but feel their hearts soften. "Third Princess Consort, please accept Princess Yu's wish." The envoy from Huangzi Nation had just been humiliated by Hellion Vivian. Now that he wanted to regain his dignity, he smiled warmly and said, "Third Princess Consort, do you have the heart to deny such a touching love?" Hellion Vivian glanced at the envoy and stood up slowly. With a flick of her fingers, she removed the hooded cloak on her head and threw it on her chair, revealing her stunning face. She was wearing an exorcist's robe underneath, but there was a white fur coat around her shoulders. She was absolutely gorgeous. She was tall and slender, and the corners of her mouth were curved. Her aura was fierce and outstanding. Just by raising her eyebrows, she could cause the surrounding people to gasp. Zongjing Wenren's hand, which was holding the teacup, paused. It was as if there was only this figure left in his eyes. If Zongjing Yu's beauty was refreshing like water, Hellion Vivian's beauty was captivating and enchanting. At first glance, it was enough to leave an unforgettable impression. In addition to her voice and appearance, there was a languid and mischievous air that was different from other girls. One could not help but stare at her again and again until they lost their minds. It was not that Zongjing Wenren had never seen Hellion Vivian before. Back then, she was still young and spoke softly. This time, when he looked at her again, her eyes were as bright as stars and she walked as if there was no one around. It was as if she was a completely different person. She was so dazzling that the entire magnificent hall became a foil to her. The emissary from Huangzi Nation did not expect Hellion Wei to grow up to be so beautiful. Even when they were talking just now, she was standing at a high vantage point and far away. Her hooded cloak covered her face, so he could only see her chin at most. Now that Hellion Wei had walked over, the closer she got, the more beautiful her breathtaking face became. The surroundings were so quiet that not a single sound could be heard. Even Zongjing Yu did not expect her to be so beautiful. She bit her thin lips and said, "Sister." Hellion Wei stopped in front of her and tilted her head slightly. She was not looking at her, but at Zongjing Wenren who was sitting beside her. "Crown Prince, does everyone in the Shenyuan kingdom have this kind of hobby? Do you like to be someone's concubine?" As soon as she said this, Zongjing Wenren, Zongjing Yu and Elder Shu Wu's expressions were extremely ugly. Hellion Vivian smiled and continued, "Zongjing Yu right? You want me to fulfill your wish? You even accused me of not knowing the bigger picture. Why? Before you fell for Beligaju, didn't you know that he was already married?" Chapter 647. Zongjing Yu was not afraid of her saying that. She was already prepared for this. With reddened eyes, she immediately straightened her back and refused to back down. "I like him. Even if he has you, I can still accept it. For him, I'm willing to do anything." Hearing this, everyone present was moved by the girl's deep feelings. It was indeed a lot for a princess to lower herself to such a level. Moreover, Zongjing Yu's eyes were already welling up with tears. Many men were touched and softened. Hellion Vivian glanced at the crowd and knew what they were thinking. She smiled coldly and said, "You want to talk about feelings with me? Among all the feelings in the world, there are those who are willing to sacrifice themselves to save others. There are those who are willing to spend thousands of years with a single glance. There are also those who are willing to sacrifice themselves to put out the fire. However, none of these feelings are destructive or intrusive. Zongjing Yu'er, since your brother won't teach you, let me, an outsider, teach you. What you did was not love. You did it because you wanted to establish a chastity. Haha, you said that even if Beligaju had me, you could still accept it. You ruined others' lives and still have the courage to brag about your thick skin. It's rare. Hellion Vivian's last sentence embarrassed Zongjing Yu'er. She was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. Her whole body was trembling as if she was being bullied. The exorcists of the Shenyuan dynasty immediately stood up and shouted, "Third Princess Consort, don't go too far." Hellion Vivian smiled faintly and said, "Why? You're embarrassing yourself, and you won't let others talk about it." Princess Consort. Lord Chen was the closest to Hellion Vivian. He said with a pleading tone, "His Highness hasn't said anything yet. Let's wait." Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. She seemed to have changed her mind. She looked at him with a smile and said, "Lord Chen, you mean to let His Highness handle this matter?" The official surnamed Chen had been an official for many years and understood the mentality of this kind of concubine the best. It was obvious that she wanted to use the fact that she was favored to prevent His Highness from conferring concubines again. However, she did not consider that the other party was the princess of the Shenyuan kingdom. No matter what, His Highness had to consider the bigger picture. Even if he did not consider the bigger picture, Zongjing Yu'er was beautiful and had deep feelings for His Highness. Which man would not want her? When Lord Chen thought of this, he straightened his posture and said, "Of course, the royal family is in charge of such an important matter." Zongjing Wenren glanced at Hellion Vivian before he shifted his gaze to Elder Shu Wu. Elder Shu Wu received the order and immediately smiled. He stepped forward and said loudly to Beligaju, "Your Highness, if Your Highness is willing to accept the marriage, I hope that Your Highness will show your attitude. I heard that Your Highness has been married for so long, but there has been no movement from the princess consort. If Your Highness likes such a woman, you can keep her. However, Princess Yu'er has been noble since she was young and has never served anyone. How can a princess be a concubine? It is better to leave this position for someone else." The little one frowned when he heard this. Did this old man mean that third sister-in-law should be a concubine? What a joke. Of course, once the royal family agrees, these exorcists will be under Your Highness' command. Elder Shu Wu was all smiles. He believed that Bailey Jiuju would not reject his offer. After all, the current War Dragon dynasty could not do without the help of the Shenyuan kingdom. When Hellion Vivian heard this, she tilted her head and smiled. She twirled her long hair with her fingers, looking somewhat nonchalant. Zongjing Yu'er was originally very happy, but when she saw that smile, she felt very displeased. At the same time, she felt extremely embarrassed and angry. The light in his eyes couldn't help but sink. When he looked at Wei Wei, he brought out a cold intent. So what if she was his official wife? She was the princess of the Shenyuan kingdom, so she was naturally more noble than her. Furthermore, she had admired that person for a long time. Back then, he was still a teenager. She had only taken one look at him from afar and fell for him. All these years, she had been waiting for an opportunity. Now that the opportunity had come, she would not give it up no matter what. Furthermore, as long as she could get close to that person, she was confident that he would see the good in her. At this thought, Zongjing Yu'er lifted her head and looked at Beligaju with sparkling eyes. That person seemed to be walking towards her. Zongjing Yu'er's heart was beating wildly, and her face was flushed. She was thinking about how she should respond if he were to speak to her. Lord Chen, who was beside her, said with a smile, "It seems that His Highness has also fallen for the princess. Otherwise, based on his character, he would not have come here personally." Zongjing Yu'er became even more embarrassed when she heard this. She felt that all her efforts were worth it. Beligaju was indeed walking toward her. He was wearing a black robe with exquisite workmanship. Even the sleeves were lined with silver embroidery, outlining the auspicious clouds. Everything about him showed his innate elegance and nobility. He was holding another cape in his hand. As he walked past the officials, The hubbub of voices gradually died down. Regardless of whether it was the envoys from the various countries or the exorcists, all of them could feel the powerful aura that was inherent in this man. It was as if they would blaspheme this celestial being just by saying a few words. It was not a complete celestial aura. There was also a dark aura that flowed around him. When such an aura was placed on a person who was full of self-restraint, it would only make it harder for people to look away. 3. Royal family. Zongjing Yuer's face was flushed red. Her voice was as sweet as melted candy. She raised her eyes and was about to meet Belegaju's eyes. There was a cracking sound. It was as if something had broken beside her ear. Then, there was a strong smell of blood. Ah! Lord Chen cried out in pain. He pressed on his broken right arm with his left hand. He was in so much pain that his forehead was dripping with cold sweat. Your Highness, why? What did I do wrong? Why are you treating a loyal subject of the imperial court like this? Belegaju smiled. The wind blew at his long robe. It was a black cape with a raised collar made of silver fox fur. It complemented his handsome face and made him look even colder and more noble. He was like a noble who had been awakened from the darkness. His every move was filled with innate elegance, even if he did not look very approachable. A loyal subject of the imperial court? Do you think that I do not know that you accepted 1,000,000 taels of silver from the Shenyuan Kingdom's envoy yesterday? What? Who would have thought that Lord Chen would? The officials started whispering to each other. Lord Chen was so frightened by his words that his face turned pale. Your Highness, please listen to my explanation, Your Highness. Yet Bailey Jiaoju only took the white handkerchief and wiped the bloodstains on his fingers. He smiled devilishly and gracefully. You don't need to explain. I want to kill you, not because you took the money, but because you meddled in something you shouldn't have. Chapter 648. Swoosh. The white handkerchief was like a sharp knife that cut through his neck. Lord Chen's eyes widened in shock. Blood trickled down his hand. Lord Chen only touched it for a moment before he fell backward. His whole body was convulsing, and his throat was gurgling. Then, he tilted his head and stopped breathing. The shadow guards moved quickly. The moment Lord Chen fell, they dragged him away and cleaned up the bloodstains. They did not even blink during the entire process. The conservative ministers watched this scene with numbness in their scalps, and their hands started to tremble. His Highness had made his intentions clear. The only thing Lord Chen could interfere with was the marriage alliance. Lord Ge was also dragged away like this. Zongjing Yuer was the closest to Lord Chen. The long dress that she had meticulously prepared was now stained with blood. She looked a little disheveled, but more than that, she was embarrassed. Her face was burning hot. Was he rejecting her? Belegaju took another step forward. He did not even look at the so-called princess. He grabbed the fur coat in his hand and covered Hellion Vivian's head with it. Then, he pulled her over with a cold expression. Who allowed you to show your face? Hellion Vivian tried to defend herself. This hat is blocking my view. Wear it even if it is blocking your view. Belegaju pressed down on the furry hair in front of him and looked in the direction of Zongjing Wenren with his deep eyes. The light in his eyes was so cold that it seemed to have frozen. Zongjing Wenren finally reacted. He had been staring at Hellion Vivian since the beginning. Zongjing Yuer bit her thin lips and suddenly opened her mouth. Her soft voice was filled with persistence. Your Highness, no matter what decision you make, I want to tell you that I really like you. When Hellion Vivian heard this, she glanced at the man beside her and sighed in her heart. He was indeed a femme fatale. He had so many admirers. However, she was not afraid that he would waver. She would also find a few handsome men and see whose harem was stronger. Belegaju did not need to think to know what the little fox in front of him was thinking. He reached out and pinched her wrist. Using his strength, he lowered his voice and chuckled in her ear. With a warning tone, he said, If you dare to carry out the things in your mind, I will make you unable to even get out of bed. Hellion Vivian's back stiffened. Her small face was very sincere. I wasn't thinking about anything just now. Belegaju looked at her coldly as if he was looking at an idiot. He said slowly, I am now your guardian demon. Do you think that I can't detect your stream of consciousness? Hellion Vivian, fuck. This was already considered as spying on her privacy. In that case, would she not even be able to think of doing bad things in the future? How annoying. You can still do bad things. Bailey Jiaoju lowered his head and kissed the corner of Wei Wei's mouth as if there was no one else present. He didn't care in the slightest that someone was looking at them. He lowered his voice and whispered in her ear, however, you can only do it to me. You can do whatever you want, my master. Hellion Vivian. Don't speak in such a childish tone. Bailey Jiaoju laughed, as if he enjoyed seeing Hellion Wei Wei's angry expression. Even that pair of unfathomable eyes became much brighter. Zhongjing Yue did not expect that her confession would be ignored just like that. That man had not even looked at her from the beginning to the end. Your Highness, why are you treating me like this? Am I wrong to like you? Zhongjing Yue's tears gushed out. She looked very beautiful as she cried. This made the envoys and exorcists from the other countries feel a little sad. A woman like her should be doted on. Even if the War Dragon Empire's third prince was unwilling to marry her, he should not have embarrassed her like this. When Beligaju heard this, he glanced at Zhongjing Yue. Zhongjing Yue seemed to have seen hope. Her eyes were still filled with tears as she raised her head with reddened eyes. Bailey Jiaoju smiled. His etiquette was so graceful that no one could pick out the slightest mistake. You asked me, where did you go wrong? I actually want to ask you, I don't like you, yet you insist on sticking in front of me. What's the meaning of this? Are the women of the Shenyuan kingdom so lacking in love? Why do you have to interfere in other people's families? When the little one heard this, he took a step back. He had thought that if third sister-in-law wanted to fight, he would join in the fun. But now, it seemed that third elder brother was going to flip out. It was better for him to stay away. When third elder brother was angry, it was definitely not something that ordinary people like him could accept. Take what he said just now as an example. Although it sounded nice, he only said one word throughout the whole process: despicable. How could the people in the main hall not understand? When Zhongjing Yue heard what Beligaju said, her face turned green and white. Her body swayed as if she was going to fall on the spot. She was a princess. When had she ever been humiliated like this? What did he think of her as? Of course, Elder Shu Wu would not allow this to continue. Third prince, I thought that your country is a country of etiquette, so you should understand. I have the same thoughts as you, Elder Shu Wu. Beligaju calmly interrupted him. His eyes were filled with coldness. As a country of etiquette, no country would send their princess out like a singer. Elder Shu Wu, why don't you ask official Wang of the Huangzi country if his country would do the same? Of course not. Official Wang immediately denied. This was a matter of national pride. The smile on Bailey Jiaoju's face widened. He was full of evil intentions as he said, look, even the Huangzi nation would not do such a thing, but the Shenyuan nation did. I refused, and Elder Shu Wu still wants to talk about etiquette with me. Ha! Bailey Jiaoju didn't say the rest of the words, but almost everyone in the audience understood. What he meant was that the Shenyuan kingdom didn't deserve it. Elder Shu Wu's face turned green. He clenched his fists and glared at official Wang, who had just spoken. Lord Wang finally realized that Bailey Jiaoju was using him as a tool just now. Damn it. It was agreed that the three countries would work together to deal with the War Dragon dynasty. How did he end up helping Beligaju to deal with Elder Shu Wu? This man. Official Wang could not think of any adjectives to describe Beligaju. He was dumbfounded. Hellion Wei silently learned from the experience at the side. Before she met His Highness, she thought that she was shameless enough. But after meeting His Highness, she realized what it meant to be an expert. To scold someone and even use an alliance's emissary as an excuse, it was really clever. No wonder His Highness always said that her methods were not ruthless enough. All she knew was to fight and kill. She did not know the ropes at all. Now, Hellion Vivian finally understood what it meant to be ruthless. She looked at Elder Shu Wu and Emissary Wang's expressions, then at Naylan Yuis. How humiliating it must be to not be able to scream in pain. Chapter 649. If that's the case, let's not waste any more time. Zhongjing Wenren stood up coldly and stared at Beligaju. Brother Beligaju, how do you plan to solve the seal? Once the divine exorcism seal is destroyed, not only the capital city, but the entire divine mainland will face the invasion of demons. Now that the envoys from the 3 countries are here, we have the ability to suppress the seal. You can do whatever you want if you refuse to let us settle in the capital city and reject the marriage alliance. However, this is a matter of great importance to the people of the world. We can't just do whatever you want. The War Dragon Empire has its own elder compound. Why don't we have a competition to see which country is better at yin and yang exorcism? The winner will guard the seal. When Wu Jing heard this, he said angrily, Crown Prince Wenren, who doesn't know that the Shenyuan kingdom is best at yin and yang exorcism? You're obviously doing this because you know we don't know how to exorcise demons. If you're so capable, let's have a martial qi competition, General. Zhongjing Wenren laughed sarcastically. The only way to deal with demons and resentful spirits is to use yin and yang exorcism. If you use martial qi to fight ghosts, you'll be the one who dies in the end. Wu Jing was speechless. He could only stare at Zhongjing Wenren, hating himself for not being able to use his strength. At this moment, the envoys from the other 2 countries spoke. Crown Prince Wenren is right. The royal family will compete fairly. The winner of 2 out of 3 rounds will guard the seal. While they were speaking, the exorcists behind them stood up and rotated their wrists. When they looked at Wu Jing, their eyes were filled with contempt. It was obvious that the other countries had come prepared. From the beginning, they had planned to use the competition as an excuse to send troops to the capital city. Everyone knew that the War Dragon Empire's elder compound had not recovered its power yet. It was impossible to find anyone who knew how to exorcise demons. The War Dragon Empire, which had the most say among the 4 countries, was now being suppressed by the other 3 countries. As a civil official, Liu Yu was anxious. Zhongjing Wenren raised his eyebrows and said slowly, Brother Bailey, don't tell me you don't agree to this. The exorcists laughed. It was obvious what they were laughing about. Your Highness. A representative from the elder compound stood up. It was a young man. His eyes were burning with anger and he said, I'll compete. I've learned the art of yin and yang. However, just by looking at his attire, one could tell that he was still a dabbler. The ministers all understood, and the young man who spoke also understood that he could not defeat the other party, but he could not let them come to his door and bully him. All right. Elder Shu Wu stroked his white beard and took a step forward. Since someone has agreed to participate in the competition, let's decide on the candidates and the rules of the competition. We need to confirm this as soon as possible. When the officials heard this, they all looked at Beligaju. If His Highness agreed to the marriage, it would not be so difficult. But none of them dared to say it out loud, for fear that they would be killed on the spot. However, they already had a plan in mind. When the retired emperor returned, they would definitely report this matter to him. Not only did the 3rd Princess Consort's stomach not make a sound for so many months, but this time, His Highness even rejected the Shenyuan dynasty's marriage alliance because of her. They really didn't have the slightest bit of hope of winning this competition. At this thought, someone finally could not help but take a step forward and knelt on the ground loyally. He kowtowed heavily and said, Your Highness, this old official has been an official for decades. On account of this old official's diligence and sincerity, this old official will only say one thing. The War Dragon dynasty has never been good at losing yin and yang. If we lose this competition, not only will we lose our reputation, but we will also lose the entire imperial city. This old official earnestly requests that Your Highness reconsider the marriage alliance with Princess Zhongjing. This official also earnestly requests that Your Highness reconsider the marriage alliance with Princess Zhongjing. Another person knelt down and kowtowed loudly on the ground. A smug smile appeared on Elder Shu Wu's face. These old officials were still the most sensible. From beginning to end, Bailey Jiaoju had been standing tall and straight, the corners of his mouth hooked up into an arc. At this time, when he heard the 2 ministers kowtowing, A cold light flashed through his eyes. It looked like he was about to make a move. Hellion Vivian tugged at his fur cloak and shook it with her head. Beligaju narrowed his eyes, revealing his demonic nature. Why are you stopping me? Didn't you hear what they were saying? I said before, I will do the killing. Hellion Vivian looked up and smiled. She held his hand. Your hands are so beautiful, you can't always fight and kill. Furthermore, those two people are Imperial Grandfather's people. How are you going to explain to Imperial Grandfather if you kill them? Beligaju lowered his head and smiled. Weiwei, you seem to have forgotten. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Beligaju said casually, I am a demon. It is only right for demons to kill. However, since you don't like such a bloody way of handling things, then forget it. Killing people is a waste of energy. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have bothered to kill them. It is not worth dirtying my hands. It will take a long time to wash them. Hellion Vivian. Those are humans, not flies or mosquitoes. Can you not speak so casually? After Beligaju finished speaking, he let go of Hellion Vivian's waist and walked towards the two officials. His eyes were deep and his voice was cold. Help these two officials up. Yes. The shadow guards stepped forward in unison. The two officials thought that the imperial family had finally thought it through and their faces lit up with joy. Zongjing Yuer glanced at Hellion Vivian and said softly, I know he likes you, but Hellion Vivian, you can't deny that if he marries me, I can solve all his problems. What about you? What can you do for him? When Hellion Wei heard this sentence, her lips curved into a meaningful smile. Zongjing Yuer was enraged by her smile. She took a deep breath and said, I don't want to make things too awkward. He will agree to marry me in a while. As long as you give up your position as the imperial concubine, I will guarantee that you will never. Before she could finish her sentence, Beligaju's voice was like ice on the ground. It filled the entire hall. Don't you want to compete? Lord Qi, Lord Xie, just stand there and watch. Who says that the War Dragon dynasty will definitely lose? Zongjing Yuer's face froze. She slowly turned her head and looked at Beligaju in disbelief. Even at this stage, he still refused to marry her. How could the War Dragon dynasty win in its current state? Zongjing Wenren's eyes turned cold. Leng Yi, go easy on him in the first round. He is a beginner. Teach him what exorcism is. Yes. Leng Yi, the exorcist, took a step forward. His face was full of disdain, as if he did not care about the young man at all. Chapter 650. The exorcists from the other two nations stepped forward as well. When they saw the young man sent by the War Dragon dynasty, they all sneered at him. Look at what he's wearing. I don't think he knows how to bind spirits. Ha ha, bind spirits. I think he might not even be able to detect where the ghost is. The exorcists laughed together. None of them were old, in their 20s, but the power they exuded was not to be underestimated. The power of an exorcist was determined by the robes they wore and the items they carried on their backs. The more complete the set, the more powerful they were. Since the three nations had decided to join forces, the exorcists they sent were not to be trifled with. They were certain that no one in the War Dragon dynasty could deal with them. They had gone too far. The young man could not ignore the resentment and anger in his heart. However, now that he had stepped forward, he did not know what to do. Moreover, he could clearly feel how powerful the exorcists from the Shenyuan kingdom were. They carried dual swords, carried talismans, and even had spirit-binding ropes around their waists. The Shenyuan kingdom did not send their most powerful exorcists because the situation before them did not require their help. They were more than enough to deal with it. It would be a lie to say that he was not afraid. The young man was indeed a beginner. He had only seen what ghosts looked like when he was with the elders. Now that he was facing a real battle, he was not confident. However, he had to give it a try. The first round, spirit binding. This is the first step of exorcism. If you can't even complete this step, there's no need to mention protecting the divine exorcism seal, Elder Shu Wu said as he glanced in the direction of the Battle Dragon dynasty. In all fairness, Liu Yu was anxious. He was really worried for the royal family. If this decision was not done well, the consequences would be unimaginable. The two old officials who persuaded Beligaju to marry seemed to have predicted the outcome. They shook their heads and sighed. Spirit binding, to put it bluntly, was to bind the spirits in place and control them, preventing them from harming others. It will be completed in half an incense stick's worth of time. In order to avoid any accidents, if anyone fails to restrain the vengeful ghost, this old man will personally take care of it. So, everyone, there is no need to worry about anything happening. As Elder Shu Wu spoke, he took out a cosmos sack from his robes. This is the soul of a wild ghost who has been dead for less than half a year. We met her on our way here. She died in an accident and was affected by resentment. She is looking for a substitute everywhere. If we don't solve this problem soon, she will become a ferocious evil spirit in less than 3 months. What you need to do now is to restrain her, and the one who takes the least amount of time wins. That's it. Isn't it too simple? Leng Yi from the Shenyuan kingdom curled his lips in disdain. Elder Shu Wu stroked his white beard and smiled. To take care of the beginners, I don't want people to say that the Shenyuan kingdom is bullying others just because we are exorcists. All right. Leng Yi shrugged. Elder Shu Wu turned his face to the side and continued, the 4 of you will form a circle and stand at the 4 corners of the circle. You should know that once a ghost is released, it will try its best to escape. When the time comes, whoever the female ghost runs to will be the one to restrain her. Do you understand? Understood. The exorcists from the 3 kingdoms answered firmly. Although the young man's face was pale, he still spoke up, albeit with a lack of confidence. Elder Shu Wu did not need to look to know that they would definitely win this round. The young man's panic was obvious. When the female ghost was released later, he might be so scared that he would not even dare to move. All right, since everyone understands, let's begin. Elder Shu Wu reached out and placed the cosmos sack in the middle of the circle. After a while, the originally bulging cosmos sack began to rumble. Then, a strand of black hair crawled out from within. The black hair was dense and frightening. Then came the eyes, the bridge of the nose, and the mouth. As if she had finally found the exit, the female ghost quickly crawled out. If it were not for the fact that there were so many people around, the ministers would have run away. The scene in front of them was too frightening. The female ghost looked as if she had been crushed by something. First, she turned her head, then with those hollow eyes, she stared in one direction and rushed over. Leng Yi spoke eloquently. Then, he pointed his fingers and said, "Freeze." The female ghost seemed to have been blocked. Knowing that she could not escape from this place, she bared her teeth and suddenly rushed back. The exorcists from Huangzi Kingdom did not expect the yin energy on her body to be so strong. They almost lost control, but in the end, they managed to bind the female ghost to the spot. The ministers watched from the side with trembling hands. After all, once the female ghost rushed out, she would possess a human body. Once possessed, it would be easy to subdue her. Ghosts were different from humans, especially ghosts who had been dead for less than half a year. They relied on the breathing of humans to identify their location. Obviously, the female ghost was smart. After trying twice, she accurately sniffed out the location where the breathing was the heaviest and the defense was the weakest. She took 2 steps back, turned her head, and then twisted her body again. She looked in the direction of the young man, her eyes overflowing with thick black fog. Oh no! She's turning into a malicious spirit. Liu Yu watched from the periphery and could not help but stand up. Elder Shu Wu lowered his voice and said, "Calm down. She's just resentful because she couldn't break out of the encirclement. She hasn't reached the stage of becoming a malicious spirit yet." Liu Yu was still worried and looked at the young man. Not only was the young man's forehead covered in sweat, but his back was also wet. He repeated the incantation that Leng Yi and the others had seen just now. However, the female ghost was completely unaffected. She was only afraid at the beginning, but after tasting the sweetness, she suddenly rushed over and was about to bite the young man. A figure flashed in front of them. When the crowd regained their senses, Helian Wei Wei had already dragged the young man to the side. Her hooded cloak covered her face, revealing only a pair of starry eyes. She looked down at the female ghost with an eerie aura. She did not recite the incantation. She only said 2 words, "Go back." Her voice was neither soft nor loud. The female ghost laughed sinisterly, as if she was mocking this human stupidity. Her eyes were bloodshot as she reached out her black fingers and grabbed at Hellion Vivian. "You're a woman too. You can be my substitute." Ha 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 ha. When the crowd saw this, they thought that it was over. The third princess consort was definitely going to die. However, what no one expected was that Hellion Wei Wei actually stood there, her eyes sparkling, not moving at all, as if 10,000 ghosts couldn't invade her, as if she held the wind and clouds of the world in her palm. Her thin lips slightly opened, her fingertips emitting light, faintly able to hear her chanting, Lin, Bing, Do, Je, Jie, Zhen, Lai, in front. Chapter 651. Before Hellion Vivian could finish chanting the incantation, the female ghost seemed to have been frightened. She took a few steps back and stared at Hellion Vivian with wide eyes. She didn't dare to go forward and half bent her knees as if she was begging for mercy. Humans couldn't understand the ghost language and could only hear the heavy breathing. However, looking at the female ghost's posture, it could be seen that she was very afraid of Hellion Vivian. This scene was completely out of everyone's expectations. Not only were the people from the War Dragon Empire shocked, even the exorcist named Lung Yi who was standing beside Hellion Vivian was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. If he didn't hear wrongly, the incantation that the other party was chanting was the 9 syllables mantra. How could the War Dragon Empire's third princess consort know the most authentic Tao of exorcism? Exorcism. Following Hellion Vivian's last 2 words, the female ghost collapsed onto the ground. The female ghost's body bent forward and her entire body collapsed to the ground. Feeling the pain from her internal organs, she didn't dare to reach out her hand again. Everyone could see that if Lung Yi and the others could restrain the female ghost, then Hellion Vivian could make the female ghost afraid. She was so afraid that she didn't dare to move in the slightest. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Hellion Wei Wei walked toward the female ghost. "Don't come into close contact with her. Be careful of being possessed by her ghost." As if he was subdued by Hellion Vivian's Tao, Leng Yi reminded her as cold sweat broke out on his forehead. However, Hellion Vivian didn't stop. Her hooded cloak fluttered in the wind, looking free and easy. Looking at the female ghost, she still only said 2 words, but they seemed to carry the aura of sweeping away 1,000 soldiers. "Go back." The female ghost didn't say anything. Looking left and right, she turned around and went back into the Chenkuan pouch. Her speed was shockingly fast, even more anxious than when she came out. It was as if Hellion Vivian was some kind of scourge. To be able to force a ghost to this extent, they really hadn't seen it before. Everyone turned back to look at Hellion Vivian. Their faces were full of shock and amazement. Wu Jing was a boorish man. He laughed happily on the spot and said, "Third princess consort, I didn't expect you to know how to exorcise demons." Hellion Vivian smiled. She had come into contact with Yuan Xiao before, oh no, before His Highness had completely awakened. When that female ghost appeared, it was basically a natural reaction. But what made her feel strange was that she could actually understand what the female ghost was saying. What the fuck is this? In the future, when she wanted to steal things at night, would there be countless ghosts whispering behind her and she would be able to hear them? It all depends on whether you like it or not. If you don't want to hear it, you won't hear it. A familiar low voice sounded. It was the voice of a certain highness, and it even carried a mocking sneer. Hellion Vivian glanced at the seat of honor and peeked at her thoughts again. "Can't you give me some personal space?" Elder Shu Wu didn't expect things to turn out this way at all. His expression turned serious. Even the exorcists from the other neighboring countries had frozen expressions on their faces. The War Dragon Empire's elder compound had been severely damaged. They were not proficient in exorcism, so they were definitely weak in this aspect. It was because they had expected this that they decided to join forces with the 3 countries and come to the capital. But now, someone had actually recited the 9 symbolic words. And judging by the female ghost's reaction, this person's recitation of the 9 symbolic words seemed to be very powerful, because even they couldn't guarantee that the female ghost would be so fearful. It was as if there was something more evil than her here. There was indeed someone more evil than her here. Belagaju, who was sitting on the seat of honor. His face still carried a faint smile of elegance. Just behind Hellion Vivian, when no one was looking, a dangerous golden light slowly appeared in his dark eyes. It was also at that moment that the female ghost felt an aura that humans couldn't sense. She burrowed into the Chenkuan bag and didn't dare to come out again. Of course, the female ghost wasn't sure what that aura was, but the fear that came from the depths of her bloodline told her to obey, no matter what. It looked like Hellion Vivian had one. But at this moment, Great Master Shu Wu opened his mouth and asked, "Who took the least time?" In other words, he was saying that the rule was that the one who took the least time would win. It was obvious that Leng Yi from the Shenyuan Kingdom had the advantage in this aspect. On the War Dragon Empire's side, the young man himself had already spent a lot of time resisting the female ghost. In addition, Hellion Vivian had saved the situation. "I'm sorry." The young man lowered his head and clenched his fists. Hellion Vivian smiled mischievously. "It's fine. This is just the first round. You can leave now. I'll take the rest of the competition." Is the War Dragon Empire planning to change the contestant? Elder Shu Wu smiled amiably. His gaze paused on Hellion Vivian for a moment before he said provocatively, "Third Princess Consort, you don't think that all exorcists in the Shenyuan Kingdom are of this standard, do you?" Hellion Vivian smiled, showing her white teeth in a dashing manner. "The War Dragon Empire isn't as simple as you think. Just now, your princess asked me if I could give anything to His Highness. I thought about it carefully. Other than giving him money to support him, I can also help him slap people's faces. For example, your country is a bully. You." For the first time in his life, Elder Shu Wu wanted to strangle someone to death. Hellion Vivian smiled faintly, as if she hadn't said those words. "Elder Shu Wu, don't be so agitated. You're an elder." Elder Shu Wu took a deep breath. Zhongxing Yuer's little face was so angry that it looked like blood was about to drip out of it. Little Seven chewed on the meat bun and looked left and right. Then, he scratched his head. Shouldn't the main point be other than giving him money to support him? Why was the other party so angry? Shouldn't third brother be the one who should be angry? At that thought, the little one stole a glance at his third brother. As expected. Belagaju raised an eyebrow and ran his finger across his thin lips. He laughed evilly. "Give me money to support me, heh. Third brother." The little one squatted down and said seriously, "Third sister-in-law was just saying that casually." Belagaju glanced at him, then reached out and patted the little one's head. He had a mischievous expression on his face. "She can say that casually. How do you think I should punish her?" Hearing that, the little one immediately stopped talking. He lowered his bald head and looked at Hellion Vivian. He thought to himself, "Third sister-in-law, I've tried my best. Unfortunately, the enemy is too cunning." Hellion Vivian noticed the little one's gaze and glanced in his direction. She saw His Highness's half-smile and felt inexplicably scared. She began to communicate with the little one through her eyes. "What's going on?" The little one began to look up at the ceiling and moved his mouth behind him. Chapter 652. While Hellion Vivian was in a daze, the exorcists from the other two countries had already changed. The War Dragon Empire lost the first round. However, compared to the beginning, the officials no longer looked dispirited. Instead, hope was ignited in their hearts. Even the two old officials who had knelt down to ask Belagaju for a marriage alliance had changed their expressions. Everyone's gaze fell on Hellion Vivian. "Heh!" Someone chuckled. One of the exorcists sitting on the Shenyuan Kingdom's side lifted his fur robe and stood up from his wooden chair. His facial features were firm and cold. "You only recited the 9 syllables mantra and you look down on our Shenyuan Kingdom. Third Princess Consort, it's too early to boast. Don't forget, you've already lost a round." As soon as that person finished speaking, someone exclaimed, "Look at the sword on his back. Red peach wood. What's wrong with that?" The officials were confused. The youth lowered his head and muttered, "The color of the peachwood sword represents the exorcism ability of the yin-yang master." The redder the color, the more ghosts he has dealt with. After reaching a certain number, he can summon reapers. This person's appearance made the youth's previous misgivings become a reality. The spiritual aura of the cultivator was hard to ignore. The officials didn't know what was wrong with them. In front of this person, even breathing became difficult. His eyes seemed to be able to see through their lifespan and life. The situation seemed to be getting worse. Furthermore, he can summon reapers. Was there such a person in this world? The young man nodded solemnly. This is a very high-level exorcism spell. I've only seen the elder use it once, and I've never seen it again. The elder once said that if one isn't a very powerful exorcist and can't control the messenger of death, they will be directly suppressed to hell by the messenger of death, never to return to the human world. To protect the divine exorcism seal, we don't need to summon reapers, right? The officials asked nervously. The youth thought for a moment and said, some resentful spirits must be brought to hell by reapers. They can't be destroyed directly. The remaining resentment will still affect the seal. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. So this round of the competition was to summon a ghost. The commonly known as ox head and horseface. She had never seen such a thing before. And, how do I summon it? I haven't had time to learn the spell yet. You can say anything you want. The familiar voice rang in her ears again. His Highness's voice was slow and deep. Hellion Vivian said lazily, then I'll say something cool. Cool? Dazzling? His Highness simply couldn't understand this word. Hellion Vivian smiled and said, for example, come out when you die. They were all ghosts anyway. She didn't expect that as soon as she finished speaking, a small earth god would appear. Others couldn't see it, only she could see it. The small earth god was still carrying a piece of osmanthus cake on his back. After hearing Hellion Vivian's words, he immediately stopped and politely bowed to Hellion Vivian. This little god greets the great immortal and the king. The king was speaking to Beligaju, who was behind Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian cleared her throat. You are? Earth god, earth ghost. Beligaju's voice was indifferent. Because I'm often worshipped, I became a god. When the small earth god heard Beligaju's words, he was so scared that he trembled. What orders does the king and great immortal have? Hellion Vivian couldn't bear to see such a kind-hearted little old man trembling there, so she said in a low voice, it's okay, you can go back. Yes. The small earth god was relieved, and he jumped into the ground and disappeared. Hellion Vivian smiled and said, Your Highness, how unlikable are you? Other than being unlikable, I also hold grudges. Beligaju changed his position and said slowly, why don't we try it tonight? Hellion Vivian was speechless. When Elder Shu Wu saw Hellion Vivian looking down at the ground and not saying anything after so long, he smiled and said, what's the matter? Is the third princess consort thinking of changing her mind and sending someone else? Elder. Zhongjing Yuer said softly, it's not strange for the third princess consort to have such thoughts. After all, she's summoning a ghost constable. If she doesn't control it well, her soul will be taken away. The constables don't have good tempers. Oxhead and Horseface were indeed bad-tempered. They were ghosts to begin with, so they carried the aura of death around them. Not to mention ordinary people, even yin-yang masters would avoid them when they saw them. Firstly, they were afraid of losing their lifespan, and secondly, they were afraid that the constables would change. The constables were much scarier than ordinary ghosts. As long as one looked into their eyes, death was certain. Logically speaking, the constables could not be interrupted when they brought their soul into the netherworld. However, if they wanted to summon a ghost constable, they had to do it at this time. Therefore, they had to be precise in their timing. Otherwise, when the ghost constables found out that their soul was being summoned to a place for no reason, they would only have one thought left in their mind. And that was to kill them. Whenever a ghost constables went to the mortal world, they had to bring their soul to the netherworld. This was the rule. It was the same principle as the king of hell wanting someone to die at midnight. He would never let them live until midnight. Therefore, yin-yang masters needed to be able to summon and send the ghost constables away. Yellow talismans were essential to any exorcist. Using blood to create a talisman, one could cast a spell and make the talisman appear in the form of a vengeful spirit. This was to achieve the effect of deceiving the ghost constables. Once there was a problem, the ghost constables would immediately transform. When that happened, one could only imagine what would happen to the caster. After hearing Elder Shu Wu and Zongjing Yuer's words, the young man became even more worried. He looked at Hellion Vivian and said, "Third Princess Consort, let me go." Although his spell was not good, he was an exorcist of the War Dragon Empire. He had to protect his master. This was the basic duty of a subject. Hellion Vivian looked at him again. Seeing that he was still young, she reached out and rubbed his head. "Don't worry, I can handle it." Hearing this, Zongjing Yuer spoke again in a gentle manner. "I'm afraid the third princess consort is underestimating the summoning of the ghost constables. Bing Xian, if anything happens to the third princess consort, you must save her. Do you understand?" At first glance, this sentence sounded like she was concerned about Hellion Vivian. However, at this moment, it sounded like she was certain that Hellion Vivian would lose. The exorcist named Bing Xian let out a long sigh. "Princess, you are still so kind. However, some people might not appreciate it." As he spoke, Bing Xian glanced at Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. These two people were echoing each other as if they had already won. How interesting. The people of the Shenyuan dynasty have always been so. Hellion Vivian seemed to be thinking of an adjective, but after a long time, she could not come up with a more elegant one. Then, she heard Beligaju slowly say 8 words. Chapter 653. You are good at imagining things. His tone was not harsh at all, but it was lethal. Most importantly, it did not spoil his elegance. However, it made Zongjing Yuer and Xian Bing's faces turn livid in an instant. Obviously, His Highness's double entendre was very effective. Apart from talking about Xian Bing, he was also talking about how Zongjing Yuer insisted on marrying him. In short, it could be summed up in one word: despicable. Once again, the crowd understood the meaning of his words. They looked at each other. Suddenly, they felt that Beligaju was invincible even if he did not use his martial arts. Moreover, they could not refute him. Xian Bing clenched his fists and looked at Zongjing Yuer, who was about to cry. His chest heaved up and down, and he gritted his teeth, but he could not say anything. Hellion Vivian felt that she must bring the royal guards with her when she was out. She could not be bullied. She had angered the other party before they even started the fight. We will know whether it is a fantasy or not in a moment. Zongjing Wenren sneered. Xian Bing, since the third princess consort does not need to give in, you should show her what a real exorcist is. Yes. Xian Bing stood sideways, exuding a sharp spiritual aura. He glanced at Hellion Wei with a confident look. Hellion Vivian stood in her position according to the rules. No one could see her expression from the side of her face. Bailey Jiuju held the teacup in his hand. His fingers were slender and lustrous. His fingernails were pink and translucent. They glowed faintly like pearls. A black ring was clasped on his pinky finger. The ring seemed to be made of jade. The ministers were still worried. They looked at Hellion Vivian and whispered, "Do you think the third princess consort can do it?" "I don't know." They did not know. That was a ghost summoner. Who would dare to do such a thing? Only the young man's face was pale. The princess consort doesn't even stand properly. What do you mean? The ministers were confused again. The young man clenched his fists. I once saw the elder summoning the reapers. He held a talisman in his left hand and a sword in his right hand. He chanted the incantation to summon the reapers, but the princess consort, Hellion Vivian did not take the yellow talisman at all. She stood there, her empty sleeves fluttering in the wind. Seeing this, Xian Bing sneered and said, "Third princess consort, you didn't even know how to do it. Do you need me to teach you?" The other exorcists laughed when they heard what Xian Bing said. Hellion Vivian's eyes were indifferent. He's a guest from afar, so I have to give him some leeway. I won't use the yellow talisman. Hearing this, Xian Bing laughed even more mockingly. I've never heard of anyone who can summon a ghost without using a yellow talisman. Third princess consort, You're so nice to hear. It's more than nice to hear. You're exaggerating too much. The exorcist from Huangzi Kingdom looked at Hellion Vivian with disdain. You're just reciting the mantra of 9 syllables. You really think you're so important? The young man was anxious. Why didn't the princess consort use the yellow talisman? Must she use the yellow talisman? Most of the ministers did not know the art of yin and yang, but they knew how useful the yellow talisman was just by listening to the conversation. The young man was so anxious that his tone changed. Of course, the yellow talisman can not only summon the reapers, but also send them away. Without the yellow talisman, the reapers will be difficult to control. Elder Shu Wu laughed and said sarcastically, the third princess consort is really brave. Hearing this, Wu Jing suddenly stood up. Your Highness, should we replace the princess consort? Even if we're going to die, it should be us men. Why should we let a woman stand in front of us? As Wu Jing said this, he glanced at the old ministers who only knew how to make sarcastic remarks and clenched his fists. Elder Shu Wu and Zhongzheng Wenren smiled when they saw this. Now that they knew how powerful they were, why did they not do it earlier? However, what they did not expect was that Beligaju said calmly, she hasn't been out of the palace all this time. Her claws have been itching for a long time. Now that someone is here, let her have some fun. Elder Shu Wu and Zhongzheng Wenren were speechless. What did he mean by have some fun? They were humans, not cats and dogs by the roadside. Nor were they punching bags for training. Wu Jing didn't expect that his master would say such a thing. He was stunned and turned around to look at him. Indeed, not only the people from the Shenyuan kingdom, but even the envoys from the other 2 neighboring countries were flushed with anger. It was obvious that they were furious. The envoys all stood up and shouted at the exorcists who were preparing to summon the reapers, you must win. They wanted to see who was the one playing with whom. The exorcists stood in their respective positions, not knowing what was going on. The smart Hellion Vivian saw the smile on His Highness' face and knew that he must have said something that angered both men and gods. Sigh, with such a sharp-tongued husband, she must be good at fighting. Hellion Wei Wei felt that it was like killing a boss in an online game. She was slashing and slashing with all her might, while a certain highness was leisurely following behind her and enjoying himself. From time to time, he would draw aggro for her and so on. Forget it, who asked her to be a domineering president? She should be the one to do all the fighting and killing. His Highness was so beautiful, it was better to use his looks to defeat people. She was responsible for overturning the world while he was in charge of his beauty. A clear division of labor. That was good. At that thought, Hellion Vivian felt her entire body brimming with energy. After all, being able to let her other half enjoy himself was one of the essential skills of a domineering president. How could she not be excited? He Eyes was not here now, but if he heard Hellion Vivian's thoughts, he would definitely vomit blood and die. His silly little sister had not figured out her position until now. This was too much. Oh no. Heart. What kind of empress was the woman responsible for overturning the world while the man was in charge of his beauty? Unfortunately, Hellion Vivian did not hear Hei's inner thoughts. Now, from right to left, you will summon one by one. The rules are the same as before. Whoever uses the least amount of time wins. Elder Shu Wu announced the rules of the competition, his voice still mocking, but I must remind you that if something goes wrong this time, it will not be so easy to settle. If some people are not strong enough, it's better not to push themselves too hard. Everyone knew who Elder Shu Wu's words were directed at. They all turned to look at Hellion Vivian. Their eyes were filled with worry and mockery. Chapter 654. Zhongzheng Yu laughed coldly in her heart. Since you don't know what's good for you, I'll let Xian Bing send you on your way. Zhongzheng Yu believed that Xian Bing would have his own plans even if she did not say anything. After all, he would not allow anyone to humiliate him like this. Sure enough, Xian Bing's eyes darkened. His mouth moved as if he was chanting something. Whitey, who had been staying in the fantasy space, heard the commotion. Her cold voice rang in Hellion Vivian's ears. Vivian, listen carefully to the exorcist next to you. What is he chanting? Is it a spell? I think so. Hellion Vivian communicated with her guardian beast using her consciousness. A light flashed in her eyes. If you didn't remind me, I wouldn't have heard it. His spell is quite strange. Whitey's voice deepened. He started chanting before the competition. Things are not as simple as they seem. You have to be careful. Okay. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. The first exorcist in line was the gigolo from Huangzi Nation. He had already started chanting. First, he used his peachwood sword to draw a few lines on the ground. Then, he held the yellow talisman in his hand and started chanting. The moment he picked up the yellow talisman, the atmosphere in the hall changed. An indescribable chill came from all directions. Everyone could feel the bone-piercing chill on their backs. It was an indescribable feeling. It was as if they had sensed someone behind them, but when they turned around, there was no one there. The entire hall seemed to have lost its vitality. They could vaguely hear something. It sounded like the wind, but it also sounded like someone was panting. The sound was getting louder and louder. The gigolo's forehead was covered in sweat. He could not figure out what was going on. He paced around in circles. How could this be? What happened? The other exorcist from the neighboring country was the closest to him. As soon as he leaned over, his expression changed. This is. The gigolo's lips were pale and trembling. 2 reapers. Don't worry. You can take your time. Although he was comforting the gigolo, the exorcist took a step back. 1 reaper was hard enough to deal with. If there were 2 reapers and one was sent away, what would happen to the other? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a little scared. At first, no one knew what was going on. As the air around them grew colder and colder, even the lights dimmed. Only then did people see 2 shadows. Accompanied by the sound of chains, they walked towards the gigolo with expressionless faces. There was not a trace of blood on their faces. A pair of dead eyes gloomily looked at everything around them. They were even more terrifying than the female ghost from before. The question was, why were there 2 of them? The gigolo's hand that was holding the yellow talisman began to tremble. The 2 reapers had already arrived by his side. They stood on his left and right, as if they were sniffing something. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and said, "Throw the yellow talisman into the fire." Ghosts were afraid of fire, and the yellow talisman was used to guide the reapers. Wherever the yellow talisman was, the reapers would follow. When they encountered fire, they would naturally retreat. This was a general reasoning. However, the gigolo did not believe Hellion Vivian's words. What kind of joke was this? Throw away the yellow talisman? That was the only thing that could save his life. At this moment, Shen Bing also spoke. Her voice was filled with confidence. "Brother Mu Bai, don't listen to her. If you throw away the yellow talisman, you will lose the competition. Hold on for a while longer. The reapers cannot stay in the human world for too long. When the time is up, they will leave. As long as the yellow talisman is still in your hand, you will be fine." Hearing Shen Bing's words, the gigolo nodded heavily and used another part of his spiritual power. Hellion Vivian saw that he did not seem to want to listen to her. She turned her head and said to the little one who was squatting by her feet, "Xiaoqi, stay away from here. In less than half a minute, the 2 reapers will realize that what they smell is not a ghost but a yellow talisman." Did she really think that the reapers were idiots? Did she not see that the reapers' eyes were different? What will happen if the reapers realize that it is a yellow talisman? Wu Jing did not understand the rules at all. Liu Yu scolded him for being stupid and said, Reapers, they come to the human world to take souls. If they find that what they are taking is not a soul but a yellow talisman, they will directly take away the caster's soul." The gigolo listened to the sounds coming from the surroundings. More and more cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Shen Bing snorted and turned his head to Hellion Vivian, "Third Princess Consort, you better not be an alarmist. I have summoned reapers dozens of times. As long as I have the yellow talisman in my hand, I will be able to buy some time. You summoned 1 reaper. Now there are 2. How can 1 yellow talisman fool 2 reapers?" Hellion Vivian spoke slowly, almost hitting the nail on the head. Xian Bing froze at that moment. But soon, he said coldly, "It is impossible to talk to someone who does not know how to exorcise." He was confident that as long as he could buy some time, the reapers would leave. The gigolo exorcist had the same idea. He lowered his voice, "Brother Xian Bing, don't talk to her anymore. Help me see how much time I have left." What a fool. The little one held a meat bun in his mouth. There was disdain in his eyes. "Third sister-in-law, since he doesn't listen to you and listens to others, let him die. Anyway, as the host, the war dragon country has done what we should do. He is too arrogant and wants to die." Whoosh. As soon as the little one finished speaking, a gust of chilly wind blew around them. The reapers, who were sniffing on the exorcist's right side, suddenly raised their eyes. They looked at the yellow talisman in front of them and tore it into pieces. Then, they grinned. The reapers revealed their fangs. They did not know when a scythe appeared in their hands. Only then did the gigolo realize that Hellion Vivian was right. He opened his eyes wide in fear and began to ask Hellion Vivian for help. Hellion Vivian had no intention to help at all. Just like what Xiaoqi said, she had done her duty as the host. Moreover, this person had been mocking them since the beginning. He brought this upon himself. Help, help. Whoosh. If you stop the reapers from reaping the soul, you have to pay with your head. This was the rule. The sound of the scythe beheading echoed throughout the hall. Some of the ministers were paralyzed with fear. Even the other exorcist felt his scalp go numb. Hellion Wei Wei stood in the middle, looking at this scene with an indifferent expression. All of this happened too quickly. It happened so fast that Xian Bing did not have time to react. The two reapers had already disappeared into the thick black fog with Mu Bai's head. After the reapers left, the hall returned to its original gentleness. Only Mu Bai's cold corpse reminded them of what had just happened. The little one had long found the other party an eyesore. He walked over with a meat bun in his mouth. He looked fierce and said to the arrogant Xian Bing seriously, "Someone listened to your suggestion and died. Are you sure that the Shenyuan kingdom is good at exorcism? Isn't it used to harm people?" Chapter 655. They were being questioned by a child. The people of the Shenyuan kingdom felt like they had been utterly humiliated. Especially when everyone was looking at Xian Bing, their eyes were filled with suspicion. Xian Bing's face was flushed red as he waved his arms to defend himself. It's because he didn't have enough mana and didn't control the yellow talisman well enough. That's why the Reaper suddenly changed. The exorcists of the Huangzi kingdom obviously wouldn't accept such an explanation. Two of them stood up. "What did you say?" These young men were all hot-blooded, especially when it came to fighting for the glory of their kingdom. Ambassador Wang tried his best to keep the matter under wraps. He lowered his voice and said, "Don't be rash. We're now allies with the Shenyuan kingdom." The two exorcists clenched their fists and turned their heads away angrily. Xian Bing didn't say anything else. After all, a life had been lost. The atmosphere in the hall was no longer as relaxed as it had been at the beginning. Next, it was time for another exorcist from the neighboring country to summon the Reaper. But from his expression, it was obvious that he was scared out of his wits. His face was pale and his forehead was sweating profusely. It seemed that he hadn't recovered since the beginning. After all, he was the closest to Mu Bai and could see the scene more clearly than anyone else. When the Reaper walked in, he could feel the cold wind around him. It could also remind him of some bad memories. For example, he had framed his senior in order to get his master's exorcist sword. At that moment, he thought that his senior had returned. No, I can't do it. It's too scary. I can't do it." The exorcist from the neighboring country suddenly shouted. Elder Shu Wu glanced at him and said, "Forfeiting the competition means losing. Have you thought it through? Or do you have someone in your country who can take his place?" No one responded. Everyone looked at each other and shook their heads in the end. That scene just now was too scary. If it was just one Reaper, they could still handle it. But two Reapers were too scary. If that's the case, then the next one, Xian Bing. Elder Shu Wu looked towards the center of the Great Hall and pointed out, It's time to show everyone what you've got. Otherwise, some people will really think that they're right. Xian Bing took a step forward and glanced at Helian Wei Wei with a cold smile. Elder is right. Some people don't know anything and only know how to order people around. If I don't do anything, I will become a joke in front of others. Previously, Brother Mu Bai failed to control the 2 reapers that he summoned. This time, I will summon 4. Let's see who's right. What? 4 reapers? Can it be summoned? The ministers were shocked and whispered to each other. Summoning ogres was already a very difficult exorcism spell, and now he was going to summon 4 of them. Does this guy want to die? When Wu Jing said this, he did not forget how the exorcist called Mu Bai died. Wasn't it because 2 messengers appeared at the same time? He did not manage to deal with them and was dragged away by the messengers. Now, Xian Bing wanted to summon 4 messengers. Elder Shu Wu raised an eyebrow and asked, Xian Bing, are you confident? To be honest with you, Elder, I can already summon at least 5 messengers of hell. It was the Crown Prince who personally trained me. Originally, I wanted to go easy on them, but who would have thought that when I did, they would become too arrogant. As Xian Bing spoke, he glanced at Helian Wei Wei. The spell that he had just cast was supposed to be activated when Helian Wei Wei summoned the Reapers. 2 Reapers would appear at once, but he did not expect it to be activated in advance. He did not know what went wrong, it was really strange. However, it did not matter. The winner is king. In this competition, she would be the winner. Xian Bing retracted her gaze at this thought, her face full of arrogance. The people were still in awe as they focused their attention on Xian Bing. The azure dragon, who was hiding in the air, sensed her thoughts. He sneered and said, "This guy is courting death. Isn't he courting death?" The fire Chelene was also standing at the side. Other than Beligaju, no one could see them. Playing exorcism in front of Master? These humans are as stupid as always. Master, how many messengers do you plan to let in this time? The azure dragon and I will make way. Beligaju slowly picked up the porcelain cup and played with it. He said calmly, "Let's be merciful. Didn't he want 4? Then let's find him 4. The fire Chelene blinked, wondering if it had heard wrong. When did its master become so easy to talk to? Then, Bailey Jiaoju added, "Find the 4 most powerful ones." The fire Chelene was speechless. It was thinking too much. The most powerful messengers were equivalent to 2 normal messengers. This was more terrifying than 8 messengers at once. Master, this is not being merciful. You want to kill him with 1,000 cuts. The fire Chelene whispered. He said a few words. Beligaju casually raised his eyebrows. Do you have a problem with that? No, absolutely not. Do as you please, my great king. The fire Chelene kneeled on the ground and bowed. Beligaju did not look at it. Instead, he used his consciousness to communicate with Helian Vivian. When he summons the messengers, stay away from him. Helian Vivian was still a little confused. She was used to hearing Yuan Ming's evil voice. When it was replaced with such a graceful and noble voice, she was always half a beat slower. Beligaju changed his hand and half supported his face. His expression was lazy. Don't get splashed by the blood. It's dirty. As smart as Helian Vivian heard this, she knew that a certain highness was involved in this matter. The 2 messengers were obviously more irritable. Were they influenced by you? Yes. Beligaju's voice was very calm. He did not take it seriously. They were scared by me. There was no emotion in that voice, only the usual noble and elegant. Helian Vivian's mouth twitched. She did not know how the other party's fellow Taoists would feel when they heard the words "a certain highness." They were trying their best to summon the messengers of the underworld. A certain highness did not put those little messengers in his eyes at all. This was the difference between them. This man not only knew how to attract hatred, but also fought bosses. Even in the game, he was a proper godlike figure. Helian Vivian once again felt that she was very wise when she made up her mind to chase a certain someone. Although at that time, she only liked a certain highness's appearance. I'll summon it myself later. Don't help me. Hellion Vivian really wanted to see if she could summon anything. Didn't she just summon the little earth god? This time, what if she could summon a handsome man? Hellion Wei's thoughts had just settled when she heard a cold laugh from the side of her ear. Pretty boy. Chapter 656. Hellion Vivian's back stiffened. She cleared her throat and righteously said, "Can you stop peeking at my thoughts? I'll feel burdened if you do that." Hearing this, Beligaju glanced at her. Hellion Wei thought that her protest was finally effective. She straightened her back and straightened her back. Unexpectedly, that person's eyes slid over her body inch by inch. His magnetic voice carried a hint of heat. Even though they were very far away, Hellion Vivian felt like he was kissing her earlobe as he spoke. "Which part of your body hasn't been kissed by this highness? Your entire body belongs to this highness, let alone your thoughts." Hellion Vivian knew that he was talking about how he pushed her into the hot spring pool last night. She couldn't breathe, so she kept wanting to walk out. However, her tailbone was still numb, so she could only beg him to let her go. In the end, she was coaxed by him several times. She was his, so he let her go. Hellion Vivian's face heated up. She simply cut off the stream of consciousness and began to focus on the competition in front of her. She didn't want to hear what a certain highness would say later. However, a certain someone didn't seem to want to let her go. He kept staring at her with those deep eyes. His eyes were filled with waves of light. He connected the stream of consciousness again. "You don't want this highness to know what you're thinking?" Hellion Vivian nodded solemnly. Lovers needed to maintain freshness. If he saw through all her thoughts, wouldn't it be meaningless? Beligaju thought for a moment and said, "What do you plan to exchange for it?" He still wanted to negotiate. As expected, a certain highness was always this shameless no matter the situation. Hellion Vivian spread her hands. "I still have a dragon core here." Beligaju smiled with a unique arrogance. "Vivian, you want to use this kind of thing to fool this highness? Then tell me, what do you want?" Hellion Vivian finally understood the feeling of having no choice but to lower one's head when under someone else's roof. She really wanted to bite the cold and overbearing his highness. Beligaju supported his chin with his fingers and smiled slowly. "Tonight, you will take the initiative for once. Take the initiative to kiss my lips, take the initiative to sit on top of me and let me take you." Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian's first reaction was that no one could be more shameless than his highness. Her second reaction was to agree. After all, there would be a full moon in a few days, and they would have to perform dual cultivation. At that time, his highness might use some method to make her agree, so she might as well make a deal now. Anyway, his highness is so handsome, it's not a bad idea to sleep with him. Okay. Vivian calmly retracted her gaze. His highness raised his eyebrows in surprise, but when he saw her slightly red ears, he smiled again. Just as the two of them were conversing, Xian Bing had already started his summoning. He held the peachwood sword with one hand and drew a line between his teeth with his finger. Yellow talismans were written in blood. One by one, the yellow talismans floated in the air. There were 4 of them, front, back, left, right, north, south, east, and west, protecting Xian Bing in the middle. The yellow talismans were obviously different from when Mu Bai used them last time. Even the ministers who didn't know anything about exorcism could see the light emitted from the yellow talismans. "What is that?" the ministers exclaimed. The young man frowned. "It's the Reiki of an exorcist. Using Reiki to protect oneself can block the invasion of ghosts. But, not everyone can make the Reiki appear in the form of light. This Xian Bing is indeed very powerful. Even if the elders were here, they could only be on par with Xian Bing." The young man didn't say this out loud, but his words had revealed some kind of message. The faces of the ministers turned solemn once again. The Shenyuan kingdom had already won 1 round. Although they didn't want to admit defeat in the previous round. The rule was that whoever used the least amount of time would win. If Xian Bing from the Shenyuan kingdom won this round, the competition would be over. They would lose the right to protect the capital city completely. Thinking of this, Liu Yu and Wu Jing clenched their fists. They could only pray that Xian Bing would perform better. Once Xian Bing succeeded, the third princess consort would definitely lose. This was because the princess consort couldn't summon more than 4 reapers. Furthermore, there was a time limit. They had seen what happened just now. If she didn't control it well, the reapers could take her life. Furthermore, the princess consort didn't have any yellow talismans. She might not be able to summon the reapers. Just as Liu Yu and Wu Jing were worried, Xian Bing's voice shook. The wind around them turned cold again. Ghosts of hell, heed my command. Appear. Whoosh 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 whoosh. There seemed to be something flowing in the air. The surroundings of the hall seemed to be frozen. Amidst the reiki, some exorcists couldn't help but stand up and stare at one point. There was a loud bang. The lanterns near the door went out, leaving only the faint shadows on the ground. Xian Bing smiled disapprovingly. He glanced at Hellion Vivian in disdain and was about to curse her. However, he discovered that the yellow talisman on his left was shaking violently out of his control. He could clearly feel something cold sticking to the left side of his face. Xian Bing didn't turn around. As a yin-yang master, he knew very well that humans were born with 3 fires, one on the left, one on the right, and one on the back. As long as the 3 fires were there, the yang qi would always be stronger than the yin qi. Once one of the 3 fires was put out, the yin qi would invade. That was why the old people always said that when walking alone at night, one shouldn't look left and right. Even if one heard something behind him, one shouldn't turn around. This was to prevent any dirty things from following him. It was the same situation now. Xian Bing heard someone calling his name again and again. In a daze, he even saw the wolf dog that he tortured to death. It was looking at him with a pair of ghostly eyes, as if it was waiting for him to lose so that it could jump on him and bite him to death. Xian Bing couldn't stand failure. When he was cultivating, he would vent his anger on his wolf dog whenever he saw others doing better than him. No one knew about this, because in everyone's eyes, he was always a gentleman who didn't care about other things. Even after the wolf dog's death, his fellow disciples from the Hall of Elders all came to comfort him, asking him to perform a ritual for the wolf dog and help it ascend to heaven. Xian Bing pretended to be sad, but in fact, he didn't care about the wolf dog at all. Not only did he not help it, but he also greedily took away the wolf dog's spirituality. As a result, the wolf dog's soul was always incomplete. It couldn't even go to hell and could only be a lonely soul. Obviously, Hellion Vivian also saw the wolf dog, but the other exorcists didn't. Hellion Vivian frowned and touched her eyes. What was going on? Chapter 657. Beligaju, can you see that wolf dog? Hellion Vivian felt that His Highness must be able to see things that the exorcists could not. Sure enough, Beligaju's low voice was heard, and a simple yes. Hellion Vivian continued to ask, that wolf dog seems to be emitting a black aura, which is different from the aura of the Reapers. Why is that? Beligaju frowned, and his eyes were a little gloomy. You can see the resentment of the wolf dog. Hellion Vivian nodded and said, the black aura seems to be getting stronger. Beligaju did not say anything, but looked at Hellion Vivian, and his eyes were getting gloomier. Is it because she is the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl? Is that why she is so sensitive to dark things? What's wrong? Hellion Vivian did not hear Beligaju's response, so she turned to look at him. Nothing. Beligaju's voice was very calm. Under normal circumstances, even exorcists can't see that wolf dog, unless they have reached a certain level of cultivation. Hellion Vivian was interested, and she raised her eyebrows, as if she wanted to be praised. Does that mean that I am very powerful? Yes. Bailey Jiaoju looked at her arrogant and hedonistic attitude. His eyes flashed with a trace of a smile, carrying an unknown pampering. Hellion Vivian was praised, and she calmed down. Does this wolf dog have a grudge against Xian Bing? Otherwise, it would not be so vicious, and there was also a kind of desperate sadness on its body. That's right. Beligaju curled his lips, and his handsome face was full of mockery. Dogs are the most loyal. Under normal circumstances, as long as their master needs it, they would even die for their master. If Xian Bing had not gone too far and abused it in front of others, and even sucked away all of its essence after it died, and used its soul again and again to practice the spirit binding technique, it would not have been trapped in the mountain for so many years without rest. Now, it is time for it to take revenge. As soon as Beligaju finished speaking, a gust of cold wind blew over. Woof! Woof! Everyone heard the unusual bark, one after another, and the tone was so low that it sent chills down their spines. Where did that sound come from? The exorcists looked to the right, and they were extremely nervous. In the school of yin and yang, dogs could communicate with spirits, and when a dog barks, an evil spirit is coming. The ministers also stood up, and there was an indescribable fear on their faces. Since the beginning of the competition, things had happened one after another, and it was beyond their knowledge. Now, the sound of the dog barks in the hall, they were even more scared. What was the palace? That was the place where the emperor stayed. There were so many soldiers guarding the place, so how could a dog appear? Unless the dog was already dead. Thinking of this possibility, the faces of the ministers turned even paler. Everyone huddled close to each other, looking left and right. The gloomy barks reverberated in the center of the hall, making it seem unusually ethereal. Xian Bing seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. He quietly turned his head and looked at his side. A face was pressed against his left shoulder. It was pale, with a straight nose and thin lips. It looked like it had been dead for a long time, and there was a cold air all over its body. However, this was not the reason why Xian Bing was afraid. It was because the facial features of that face were clearly his own. Xian Bing took a heavy step back. Her eyes were filled with fear. Everybody was terrified. Steady. Zhongzheng Wenren shouted from the periphery, "What you see is not real. Don't move, or the formation will be broken." Xian Bing quivered. He exerted force in his fingers and straightened his body. The yellow talismans surrounded him again, but they did not light up anymore. When the dog barked, Xian Bing knew that he was in danger this time, and he did not have the spiritual light to protect himself. The dog was covered in blood. It didn't curl up in the corner anymore. Instead, it took a step forward, limped on one leg, and pounced on Xian Bing with red eyes. It tore at Xian Bing crazily. Xian Bing cursed in a low voice and kicked the wolf away. He raised his hand and was about to cast a spell. Helian Wei Wei could tell that it was a curse that would make one's soul vanish into thin air. The wolf stared at Xian Bing with its red eyes. There was something indescribable in its eyes. Helian Wei Wei knew that the Alsatian was here for revenge. However, if the Alsatian had not barked, the Reaper standing on the left of Xian Bing would have broken through the array and taken away Xian Bing's soul. In some ways, animals were more grateful than humans. It was Xian Bing who raised it. It wanted to return the favor and then take revenge. The wolf was still merciful. However, Xian Bing was determined to destroy them from the face of the earth. Otherwise, he would not have used the most poisonous spell in the art of exorcism, the yin-yang spell. Helian Vivian looked at the wolf's eyes. She thought for a moment and raised her hand slightly. Then, she gathered her spiritual chi and shouted, "Break!" Obviously, Helian Vivian's spiritual chi was stronger than Xian Bing's. Helian Vivian shouted, "Break!" The yin-yang spell had lost its original spiritual power. The dog showed its fangs again and bit Xian Bing's neck. When the yellow talisman fell, Xian Bing frowned in pain. In a second, his face was filled with fear. He could feel the wind brought by the ghost's scythe. It was getting closer and closer. At this moment, Zhongzheng Wenren's figure flashed. His white fur coat fluttered and his hand that was holding the peachwood sword blocked in front of him. The yellow talisman rose again and protected Xian Bing's body with a brighter spiritual light. Whether it was the Reapers or the wolfhounds, they all took a step back at this moment. However, Zhongzheng Wenren did not see the wolf. He only saw the ghost. Xian Bing's pupils shrank. After a while, he regained his composure and said, Your Highness. Get up." Zhongzheng Wenren's voice was cold. Xian Bing knew that he had made a big mistake this time. He held his aching neck and got up. His neck was not broken, but there was a black aura around it. He felt guilty and angry. He had cast the yin-yang spell. He did not know what happened to the wolf. Why did it have the ability to fight back? Xian Bing did not know that the wolf was not the one who fought back. It was Hellion Vivian who was standing in the corner and had not said a word. At this moment, the wolf had returned to its original hidden state. Only Hellion Vivian and Beligaju could see it. In the dark, the wolf limped toward Hellion Vivian with its left leg. Then, it knelt down with its other leg. Even though Hellion Wei Wei didn't understand the dog language, she understood that this wolf dog was grateful to her. Hellion Wei Wei thought for a while and felt that since she knew the yin-yang technique, it would be better to help this wolf dog find its way to the afterlife. Unexpectedly, the wolfhound shook its heavy head and insisted on standing in front of her, as if it wanted to protect her. Chapter 658. Hellion Vivian hesitated for a while. She then heard Bailey Jiaoju's clear, cold, and noble voice ring in her ears again. Since it insists on staying by your side, then you should keep it. After Hellion Wei Wei heard this, she did not have any reaction. Fire Chelene and Green Dragon, who had been watching from the side, looked at each other. An ordinary dog would not be able to wander around in the netherworld after all its essence had been taken away. Moreover, it had a demonic aura. This proved that this wolf dog was not an ordinary dog when it was alive. Moreover, it was full of resentment when it died. This rare encounter had allowed it to absorb the resentment of the heavens and earth. Once it recognized its master, it would become a demonic dog. It was different from other mythical beasts. If the power of the demonic dog was used properly, it would not be afraid of any evil in the demon world or the underworld. In the past, when they encountered such rare animals, their masters would want to hunt them down and keep them as their mounts. This time, he did not want to keep it. He gave it to his wife. Hellion Vivian saved the wolf dog because it was convenient. She did not expect anything in return. After all, she had raised dogs in the modern world and knew that dogs were the most loyal. She would save them if she could. Now that she heard His Highness's words, she was still thinking about it. His Highness did not need to look to know what Hellion Vivian was thinking. If you don't keep it, it will lose control of itself sooner or later and lose its nature. The wolf dog seemed to understand His Highness's words. It immediately pressed forward with its paws. The black aura around its body was like a fog. Hellion Vivian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Who did it recognize as its master? Why was it so obedient to His Highness? All right then. But I still have Little White in my fantasy space. Don't fight. The wolf dog nodded its thick head. The demonic aura that was emitting from its body made the surroundings feel cold. Hellion Vivian had made up her mind to keep the Alsatian, so she acted quickly. While everyone was looking at Zhongjing Wenren, she bit her finger and 3 drops of blood dripped down. The wolfhound's body trembled, and the black aura on its body became thicker and thicker. In the end, it gathered into a black fog. When it appeared again, its appearance had changed. Its thick black fur, and its body was more than twice its size. At this moment, the wolfhound looked like a king, majestic and steady. The only thing that didn't change was the black fog emitted from its body. It seemed to have blended perfectly into the darkness, and it was much thicker than before. The azure dragon and fire Chelene glanced at each other again. This time, the 2 divine beasts were a bit shocked. Only Beligaju remained indifferent as he glanced at the wolfhound. The Alsatian nodded and stood in front of Hellion Vivian. However, this time, it was even more obvious that it was protecting her. Its entire body was beastly, and it could scare away ghosts and spirits. At this point, Xian Bing naturally couldn't see the wolfhound. He looked extremely embarrassed, and his combed hair was scattered to the side. As a civil official of the War Dragon dynasty, Liu Yu's mouth finally came in handy. This round has shown us the Shenyuan Kingdom's ability to exorcise demons. How could they deal with 4 Reapers? Haha, so they are risking their lives to deal with them. Old Liu, you are so good at talking. If it were up to me, I would say that you are boasting too much. You can't back up your words. Xiong Jing laughed out loud. How dare you mock our 3rd princess consort? You are the weakling. Xian Bing gritted his teeth. He could feel that the gazes on him were full of sarcasm. The whispers around him made his face even redder. He simply pushed all the blame to the wolfhound and loudly defended himself. If it wasn't for the wolfhound that suddenly jumped out, the formation definitely wouldn't have been broken. The wolfhound. Master Shu Wu frowned when he heard this. Xian Bing's voice was fierce. Master, do you remember the wolfhound that I used to keep? I raised and fed it, and it did this to me. It even came back to haunt me after it died. It was because of its appearance that the reapers had a chance to attack. I still remember that you used to bring it into the palace. Zhongzheng Yuer's face was filled with anger. She looked like she was condemning Xian Bing righteously. It is so ungrateful. That's why you shouldn't keep such a beast. It even came back to bite its master after it died. Master Shu Wu didn't care about what happened. Most importantly, he needed this incident to protect the Shenyuan kingdom's reputation. With the wolfhound as an excuse, at least they wouldn't be in a bad situation. No wonder you were not performing well. There was an external cause. Elder Shu Wu stroked his beard. He finally had a good explanation for Xian Bing's behavior. Helian Wei curled her lips into a smile and said, "Every exorcist knows what exactly happened. A dog's loyalty is the purest among all animals. Why would it come to you at this time? Xian Bing, do you think no one will know about the evil deeds you have done?" "I don't know what you are talking about, third princess consort." Although Xian Bing said this, he felt extremely weak in his heart. It was impossible. This woman couldn't know about what happened in the past. Elder Shu Wu saw that the situation was not right. He immediately said, "All right, Xian Bing, you were not performing well in this round. Go and have a rest." He said this because he knew better than anyone else that Helian Vivian was implying something. He couldn't let her reveal anything that would harm them. "You said that you were not performing well when you lost. Are all the people of the Shenyuan kingdom so shameless?" The little one looked up as he ate. Because he came over to eat, one of the officials didn't dare to come close to his seat. He was afraid that the seventh prince would eat him if he wasn't satisfied. When Xian Bing heard the little one's words, he felt like he had been slapped in the face. He clenched his fists and felt ashamed. Zhongzheng Yuer smiled gently. She looked at Xian Bing and said, "The seventh prince is really a child." Xian Bing summoned 4 reapers at the same time. If it wasn't for the wolf, he would have succeeded. As for the third princess consort, I wonder how many reapers she can summon. The result is not decided yet. It's too early to say that we have lost. You are right, princess. The people of the Shenyuan kingdom don't like to argue with others. However, we don't know if the third princess consort can summon the reapers. You are mocking me. Be careful, someone will make a mistake later. Xian Bing was confident that even if he didn't succeed, he was better than the third princess consort who had never learned the art of exorcism. Hearing this, the officials of the War Dragon Empire were uncertain. After all, what Xian Bing said was true. With the third princess consort's ability, it would be difficult for her to summon the reapers. Chapter 659. Actually, summoning the reapers of hell is a dangerous thing. If the third princess consort can't do it, why don't we ask someone else to do it? What if they get hurt? Zhongzheng Yuer continued. It seemed like she was being kind, but in fact, her words only made the 2 old officials of the War Dragon Kingdom distrust Helian Vivian even more. More and more people looked at Helian Vivian with suspicion, worry, and disdain. None of the exorcists had high hopes for her. Wei didn't even move an inch as she stood in the middle of the array. Her appearance was as lazy as before. Her hooded fur cloak fluttered in the wind within the main hall. Her face was as calm as the wind and clouds. She didn't take out a yellow talisman. She merely stood there, not paying attention to the sounds all around her. It's impossible for her to summon the reapers of hell in that posture. Xian Bing sneered. She really doesn't know anything. Does she think that exorcism is that easy? Zhongzheng Yuer sighed and said, "The third princess consort is too competitive. She wants to win even when she's not good at it." At that moment, the officials of the War Dragon Kingdom were in despair. Although they were mentally prepared, it was impossible for Helian Vivian to win. However, they did not want to lose too badly. But now, looking at the princess consort's posture, the reapers of hell would not appear. However, what they didn't expect was that at this moment, a gust of black wind suddenly surged out of the main hall. Like a fog, it rapidly rose up. Hellion Vivian clenched her fist, and spiritual energy surged into her palm. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Listen to my command, appear. The invisible air rose rapidly with the incantation, and Hellion Vivian's cape fluttered. Her long black hair fluttered in the wind, and she looked indescribably handsome. The crowd widened their eyes in disbelief. The surrounding air was not only cold, but ice had formed at the corners of the walls. When he looked over again, he saw no less than 10 reapers standing in front of Hellion Vivian. Each of them was wearing a black robe, and their faces could not be seen. Their heads were half-bowed, and their words and actions were filled with respect. Not only the ministers present, but even the exorcists were shocked when they saw this scene. Their eyes flickered violently, and they could not focus at all. 10. She actually summoned 10 reapers. How did she do it? You clearly don't have any yellow talismans with you, right? Look at those messengers. What are they doing? The young man muttered to himself, they are greeting the princess. This is impossible. The first reaction of the exorcist from Huangzi Nation was to deny it. It was not because he had a problem with Hellion Vivian, but because only the best exorcist would be able to make the reapers greet them. Otherwise, it would be impossible to achieve such a feat. This is too inconceivable. The other exorcists began to discuss among themselves. However, most of them were amazed by Hellion Vivian. How did she do it? Liu Yu and Wu Jing opened their mouths wide. After the initial shock, they were filled with indescribable joy. We won. 10 of them. The princess has actually summoned 10 reapers. 4 is nothing. Look at our princess. 10 of them. Can you even summon them? Wu Jing had long disliked the people from Shenyuan Kingdom. They only knew how to bully others with their superiority. Now, they had been slapped in the face. As soon as the 10 reapers appeared, Shen Bing's expression changed. Her initial confidence and complacency had completely disappeared, and even her lips had turned pale. Zhongjing Yu clenched the white handkerchief in her hand because of what she had just said. Even Zhongjing Wenren did not expect that Hellion Vivian would be able to summon 10 reapers. However, at this point, Elder Shu Wu did not give up. Lord Wu, the third princess consort, has yet to send the reapers away. It's too early to say anything now. Let's wait for the final result. After such a long time, the reapers have yet to be sent away. I'm sure the third princess consort is not as relaxed as she seems. Upon hearing Elder Shu Wu's words, the young man's heart sank. The longer the reapers stay in the human world, the easier it is for them to change. I'm worried that the princess consort will not be able to send so many reapers back to the Yin-Yang Road at once. Ordinary people might not understand this, but the exorcists did. When they saw that none of the reapers had left, they all took a step back. Elder Shu Wu was even more convinced that his guess was correct. He stroked his white beard and let out a long sigh. The princess is right. The third princess consort is indeed too competitive. If she doesn't send those reapers away, even if the crown prince and I join forces, we might not be able to save her from so many reapers. She probably doesn't have enough spiritual energy to send 10 reapers back, Zhongjing Wenren said calmly. His tone of certainty made everyone from the War Dragon Empire anxious. If the reapers could not be sent back, the third princess consort would be in danger. But at this moment, an unprecedented scene appeared in front of everyone's eyes once again. Hellion Vivian said something, and 6 of the reapers who had formed a circle suddenly retreated, leaving only 4 behind in the fog. Hellion Vivian led the 4 reapers and walked toward the diplomatic group from the Shenyuan Kingdom. Darkness spread behind her, as if it was going to devour everything. What are you doing? Elder Shu Wu, who had been speaking confidently, stepped forward to block her path. Hellion Vivian's voice was deep, and her aura was like that of a king. Elder Shu Wu, this is none of your business. You'd better step aside. Third princess consort, you still have 4 reapers behind you. Do you intend to negotiate with the Shenyuan Kingdom like this? Elder Shu Wu wanted to use the method he used to deal with the imperial court. Hellion Vivian laughed coldly. I have no interest in having anything to do with the Shenyuan kingdom. Just now, your exorcist failed to summon the Reapers and blamed everything on a wolf dog. Now that the 4 Reapers are here, I'll let them finish what they started earlier. As she spoke, Hellion Vivian glanced in Xian Bing's direction. You can take him away now. To everyone's surprise, the 4 Reapers obeyed Hellion Vivian's order and rushed in front of Xian Bing. Elder Shu Wu blocked her with his arm. Third Princess Consort, don't cross the line. Xian Bing has done nothing. How could you order the Reapers to take him away? Are you trying to kill him? Done nothing. Hellion Vivian laughed again and said in a deep voice, Blackie, come out. A cloud of fog rose from the darkness. The large wolf dog stood there, staring at Xian Bing. The hatred in its eyes made everyone's hearts tremble. Xian Bing took a step back and almost fell onto the wooden chair. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.